There is a pain that cuts deeper than any physical wound. It is not the sudden loss of wealth, and it is not the fading of youth. It is that fragile, devastating moment. The moment when a heart you firmly believed was yours, suddenly turns cold, and looks away. You wake up one morning, and the person you trusted more than the earth beneath your feet, is no longer the same. Their eyes carry a distant shadow, and their words are measured, feeling entirely foreign. You stand there, shattered into pieces you cannot count. You ask the silent, empty sky above. Why do people change so suddenly? Why do promises, sworn under the stars, fade away like morning mist? If you have ever felt this crushing weight, this journey is for you. Let us travel far back in time, to a small, quiet village. It was nestled at the foot of a misty mountain. There lived a gentle tea maker, who lived a simple, peaceful life. He had a young student, a companion he treated with the deepest affection. He loved him like his own flesh and blood. They shared everything under the sun, drinking warm tea under the blooming spring branches. They sat by the fire, during the bitter winter snows. The tea maker poured all his knowledge, into this young soul. He gave him all his love, and all his patience. He believed with absolute certainty, that this beautiful bond would last until his very last breath. But the world is a stage of constant motion, and human hearts are not made of stone. One evening, a wealthy merchant arrived in the quiet village. He brought shimmering silk, and heavy gold. He brought intoxicating tales of grand cities, whispering promises of endless power, and unimaginable luxury. He offered the young student a new life, far away from the quiet mountain. The next morning arrived with a cold breeze, waking the tea maker from his sleep. He walked into the living room, only to find an empty space. There was no gentle goodbye, and there was no soft explanation. There was only a cold, half-empty cup of tea, resting on the wooden table. The young man was gone. The tea maker sat down slowly, feeling his breath catch in his throat. His heart broke into pieces. It broke not merely because he lost a student. It broke because his entire belief in forever was shattered in a single instant. He wept tears of profound confusion, asking the silent, unmoving mountains around him. How could a human heart change so fast? How could years of shared warmth disappear in the darkness of a single night? This heavy sorrow is the universal core of human suffering. We are all exactly like the gentle tea maker. We build a grand house on shifting sands, and weep bitterly when the house falls. We stand by the edge of a rapidly flowing river. We reach out our hands, demanding the rushing water to stand still. When people walk into our lives, bringing us joy and comfort, we silently bind them with an invisible thread. We call this thread loyalty, or we call it eternal love. But in ultimate truth, we are holding on to a fragile illusion. The enlightened ones have always pointed to a profound truth. It is the fundamental truth of impermanence. Everything in this vast universe changes, and nothing can escape this universal law. The great mountains slowly erode into fine dust, and the mighty rivers change their courses. The soft clouds constantly shift their shapes, and the seasons turn from warm summer to cold winter. And the human heart is perhaps the most fragile, unpredictable force in the entire cosmos. We suffer terribly when things change, fighting an exhausting battle against nature. But we do not suffer simply because the heart changes. We suffer because we violently demand it to stay exactly the same. We want the beautiful flower to bloom forever. We expect the bright sun to stay at noon, without ever setting. Look deeply into the center of your own pain right now. When someone walks away from you, trust is suddenly shattered. You feel as if your entire world has completely collapsed. You feel a heavy weight, pressing on your chest. You feel you cannot take another step forward, paralyzed by the fear of moving on. But please, gently look around you, and notice that the world is still there. The sun still rises gracefully in the east. The birds still sing their familiar morning songs. The wind still gently moves the green leaves, completely untouched by your inner storm. Only your expectation has died, and only the image of the future has dissolved. It is the death of an illusion that causes the bitter tears to fall. The gentle tea maker eventually wiped his tired tears. He sat in a quiet room for many long days. He looked softly at the empty wooden chair, letting the silence wash over his weary soul. And slowly, a gentle light of understanding dawned in his wise eyes. He realized something profoundly beautiful, a truth that brought peace to his mind. The time they had shared was entirely real, and the fragrant tea was genuinely warm. The joyful laughter echoing in the small house was absolutely true. The young man leaving did not erase the pure beauty of their past days. It simply meant that their shared chapter had reached its natural end. The great book of life had simply turned to a new, unwritten page. Everyone must learn a new way to love, a way that does not bind or suffocate. We must learn to love, like we hold fresh water in our palms. If you close your fist tight in fear, trying to trap the water, it will quickly slip through your fingers. It will leave you with an empty, aching hand. But if you keep your hands relaxed and open, the water rests peacefully. Accepting impermanence is never about giving up on love. It is about waking up to reality, and setting yourself totally free. When you truly understand that absolutely nothing is forever, a quiet miracle happens inside you. You start to deeply appreciate every single fleeting moment. You look at the people around you with a new, tender clarity. You stop trying to own them, and you stop trying to control their path. You find joy in their smile right now, knowing that this very moment is a rare gift. There is a gentle peace waiting for you, on the other side of this heartbreak. But as you sit with this profound understanding, a lingering question might arise. When someone hurts us so deeply, why does the pain feel so intensely physical? There is a deep secret behind this heavy burden, hidden in the very nature of our expectations. Why does the heart feel so heavy when a promise is broken? It is a question that echoes in the silent chambers of our minds. We often believe that the pain comes directly from the other person. We think their departure is the sharp blade that cuts us. But the profound truth of Buddhist wisdom reveals a completely different reality. The blade that wounds us the most is not forged by their actions. It is forged by our own, intense expectations. We suffer not because things change. We suffer because we demanded them to remain permanent. Imagine carrying a heavy stone in your hands for many long years. You grow so accustomed to its weight that you forget you are holding it. This stone is the weight of our expectations. We place it heavily upon the shoulders of those we love. We expect them to always understand us. We expect them to never change their minds. We expect them to be the solid anchor in our turbulent ocean. But human beings are not made of solid rock. They are made of breath, and fragile emotion. When they move away, the stone falls. The loud crash shatters our world. The pain is the sudden absence of what we thought was guaranteed. Let me share a story from a distant and ancient land. There was a wealthy merchant who traveled across vast golden deserts. He was a man who trusted absolutely no one. He locked his gold in heavy iron chests. He constantly suspected his servants of stealing his wealth. He even doubted the loyalty of his closest friends. In his lonely and guarded world, he found comfort in only one thing. He trusted his own shadow. On bright sunny days, as he walked across the burning sands, his shadow was always right beside him. It followed his every single step. It never argued with his decisions. It never asked for daily wages. It never betrayed his deepest secrets. The merchant would look at his shadow and smile with deep satisfaction. He believed he had finally found the perfect and unchanging companion. He built his entire sense of security around this silent presence. He spoke to it during long and exhausting journeys. He felt entirely safe, as long as he could see its dark outline on the sand. But one evening, a terrible sandstorm swept violently across the desert. The sky quickly turned black. The bright sun was completely hidden by thick clouds of flying dust. The merchant desperately looked down to find his trusted companion. But in the absolute darkness, the shadow was completely gone. He panicked, and his heart raced with fear. He ran blindly into the raging storm, screaming for his shadow to return. He felt utterly betrayed by the only thing he had ever trusted. He collapsed in the cold sand, trembling with intense fear and deep exhaustion. When the morning light finally broke through the heavy clouds, a wise wanderer found the merchant. The merchant was weeping bitterly on the ground. He told the wanderer about the cruel betrayal of his shadow. The wanderer smiled with deep and genuine compassion. He gently helped the merchant to his feet. He pointed to the warm sand, where the shadow had returned with the bright sunlight. The wanderer spoke softly to the grieving merchant. Your shadow did not betray you. It simply followed its own natural law. A shadow depends entirely on the presence of light. When the light fades, the shadow must naturally vanish. You suffered terribly, because you expected the shadow to be independent and permanent. You demanded it to stay, even in the dark. You demanded something impossible, from the very laws of nature. This simple story reflects the exact way we relate to the people in our lives. We treat them exactly like the shadow of the wealthy merchant. We expect them to always be there, regardless of the changing light. We forget that human beings are deeply conditioned by a million different factors. Their thoughts change with time. Their feelings shift with new experiences. Their circumstances evolve every single day. When they leave or change their minds, they are often not trying to hurt us. They are simply following the complex conditions of their own lives. Just like the shadow must fade when the sun is covered by clouds. The enlightened ones taught that attachment is the root of all human suffering. We attach ourselves firmly to a fixed image of a person. We create a perfect version of them in our own minds. We fall in love with that specific image. We rely on that frozen image to make us feel safe and valuable. But that image is entirely frozen in time, while the real person is constantly moving and growing. When the real person no longer matches the frozen image in our head, we feel a profound sense of betrayal. But we must ask ourselves, who exactly betrayed us? Was it the person who simply changed, as all living things must? Or was it our own rigid expectation that refused to let them grow? Understanding this deep truth does not mean we should never trust anyone again. It means we must learn to trust, with our eyes wide open. We must love people, while fully acknowledging their human nature. They are flawed, and they are fragile. They are subject to the unpredictable winds of change. When we drop the heavy stone of expectation, a beautiful space opens up in our relationships. We can finally appreciate people for exactly who they are in this present moment. We do not burden them with the impossible task of being our permanent anchor. Healing truly begins the moment we accept responsibility for our own expectations. You must look closely at the broken pieces of your trust. You must see that those pieces are mostly made of your own demands for permanence. Forgive the person who walked away. Not because what they did was necessarily right, but because they are just as lost in this changing world as you are. Forgive yourself for holding on so tightly. Release the heavy stone and let it fall to the ground. Feel the incredible lightness in your empty hands. Feel the fresh breath entering your lungs with new and vibrant freedom. You are much stronger than the fragile illusions you have lost. The pain of shattered expectations is actually clearing the way for a much deeper wisdom. It is tearing down the fake walls you built around your guarded heart. It is forcing you to stand firmly on your own 2 feet. But as you stand up and look at the vast horizon, you might realize something unsettling. You might see that your own inner world is also constantly shifting. You might see that the very mind, which creates these heavy expectations, is never truly still. You might wonder why it is so difficult to simply exist, without creating new attachments. You might ask yourself, what exactly is happening inside this restless mind of yours? The answer lies in watching the very nature of your thoughts. It lies in understanding a mysterious river that flows endlessly within you. Look closely at the mysterious river, flowing constantly inside you. We often believe that our minds are solid and fixed. We think our feelings today will definitely be our feelings tomorrow. But sit quietly for just one moment, and gently watch your own thoughts. You will quickly see that your mind is never truly still. Thoughts arise from nowhere, and then they vanish into nothing. Feelings bloom like sudden flowers, and then they wither away without a trace. There is an old story, told among the wise mountain dwellers. It speaks of a young traveler, who wandered into a hidden, peaceful valley. He discovered a magical river, flowing with crystal clear water. The water sparkled brilliantly, under the warm afternoon sun. As the river flowed over smooth stones, it created a beautiful, melodic sound. The traveler was completely mesmerized by this perfect natural beauty. He felt a profound sense of peace washing over his tired soul. He wanted to keep this exact feeling forever. He wanted to take this beautiful, flowing water back to his distant home. So he reached out his hands and tried to grab the sparkling ripples. But the harder he squeezed his hands, the faster the water slipped through his fingers. He felt deeply frustrated and refused to give up. He decided to find a large, heavy clay jar. He dipped the jar into the river and sealed it tightly with a wooden lid. He carried the heavy jar back to his village, feeling incredibly triumphant. He gathered his friends and family, to show them the magical beauty he had found. But when he carefully opened the clay jar, he was deeply disappointed. The water was no longer sparkling in the light. It was no longer making a beautiful melody. It was just still, ordinary, and lifeless water. By trying to capture the river, he had killed the very magic that made it beautiful. The magic was not in the water itself. The magic was in the constant, unceasing flow. This young traveler is a clear reflection of our own struggling human hearts. We experience a rare moment of profound love, or deep joy. We meet someone who makes our hearts sing a beautiful melody. And immediately, we reach out our hands to grab it. We want to put that person, and that warm feeling, into a tightly sealed jar. We want to preserve it forever, exactly as it is today. We say to ourselves, this must never change. But human emotion is exactly like that flowing river. Love, joy, sadness, and anger are all currents of water moving through the mind. When we try to freeze a feeling, we destroy its natural life. When we demand someone to always love us in the exact same way, we stop their natural flow. We turn a beautiful, living connection into a stagnant and heavy burden. The person feels trapped inside our invisible clay jar. And eventually, the beauty of the relationship simply fades away, leaving both hearts empty. The enlightened teachers observed this flowing nature of the mind, with crystal clear vision. They taught that everything inside us is in a state of constant flux. Your mind is a rushing river of consciousness, never remaining the same for 2 consecutive moments. The person you were yesterday is not the exact same person you are today. Millions of thoughts have already passed through your awareness. Cells in your body have constantly changed. The breath has entered and left your lungs, thousands of times. If we ourselves are constantly changing, how can we expect others to remain permanently fixed? We suffer deeply, because we do not understand the true nature of the river. We stand in the middle of the rushing water, trying to hold on to a single, beautiful leaf floating by. When the leaf naturally flows out of our reach, we cry in terrible agony. We ignore all the other beautiful leaves that are constantly arriving from upstream. We become entirely fixated on the one thing that has already passed. Many times, we make the painful mistake of identifying with the dark water. When deep sadness flows through us, we say we are a sad person. We take a temporary wave, and we turn it into our permanent identity. This is a very dangerous trap for the soul. It is like looking at a dark cloud, and believing the entire sky is completely black. But the true sky is always vast, and completely untouched by the passing clouds. Your true self is the sky, not the temporary weather. Accepting the flowing river of the mind brings a profound sense of relief. You no longer have to exhaust yourself, trying to control every single wave. When a beautiful feeling arises, you simply enjoy it fully. You bathe in its warm light, without secretly planning how to trap it. When the feeling naturally begins to fade, you wave goodbye to it gently. You do not panic, and you do not beg it to stay. You trust that the river will bring new beauty, in its own perfect time. And the exact same is true for the painful and heavy emotions. When sorrow enters your mind, you do not need to fight it. You do not need to build a massive dam to stop the river of sadness. You simply acknowledge the dark water flowing through your chest. You know with absolute certainty that this dark water will also pass. It cannot stay forever, because nothing in the river of the mind ever stays. The pain will eventually wash away, making room for clear water once again. This is the true and profound art of living freely. It is the gentle art of standing softly on the riverbank, simply watching the water flow. You love the people in your life, as beautiful streams intersecting with your own. You deeply appreciate their presence, knowing that their currents might one day diverge from yours. If their river takes a different turn, you bless their ongoing journey. You do not build a heavy wall, to block their path and force them to stay. You finally realize that letting go is not a painful sacrifice. Letting go is simply agreeing with the reality of the universe. It is aligning your own heartbeat with the fundamental law of nature. When you align with reality, the heavy friction in your heart completely disappears. You begin to breathe with incredible ease. You find a stable, quiet center, deep within your own being. A center that remains entirely calm, no matter how fast the river of life flows around you. You are not the changing thoughts. You are not the fleeting, turbulent emotions. You are the quiet, spacious awareness that simply watches the river. You are the silent witness, completely untouched by the turbulence of the water. Finding this silent witness is the supreme key to true, unshakable peace. It is the only safe refuge in a fragile world of constant change. But as you sit peacefully and watch this ever-changing river, a new and complex question might surface in your mind. If everything is just a fleeting thought, and if every action simply washes away, why do some painful events leave such a lasting mark? Why do good people, who live with pure kindness, sometimes face the deepest and most cruel betrayals? If everything is entirely impermanent, how do we explain the heavy consequences of the actions we take? We must look beyond the moving surface of the water, to see the deep reflection of our past. We often look at the world, and we feel a deep sense of injustice. We see kind people, who give their entire hearts to others. They live with pure intentions, and they never harm a single soul. Yet they are the ones who suffer the most brutal betrayals. You might look at your own life, and ask a very painful question. I did everything right, so why did this happen to me? Why does the universe seem to punish the people who love the most? To understand this profound mystery, we must look into a mirror. It is not an ordinary mirror that shows your physical face. It is the vast, ancient mirror of karma. In the Buddhist understanding, our lives do not begin with birth. And our stories do not end with a single departure. We have traveled through countless lifetimes, crossing paths with the same souls, over and over again. Every action we take, and every promise we break, leaves an invisible thread in the universe. Nothing happens by random chance. Every meeting, and every painful separation, has a deep and complex root. Let us journey to a distant, ancient kingdom. In a bustling capital city, there lived a master weaver. She was a woman of extraordinary kindness, and pure grace. Her hands could weave silk, that looked like woven moonlight. One day, she met a young scholar. He was very poor, and deeply ambitious. He had no money for daily food, and no warm clothes for the bitter winter. The weaver felt a deep, overwhelming compassion for him. She took him into her humble home, and she cared for him. She worked day and night, by the dim light of a small oil lamp. She sold her most beautiful silk, to buy him rare books, and precious ink. She supported him entirely, for many long years. She loved him with a pure, unconditional devotion. She asked for nothing in return, only wishing to see him succeed. Finally, the young scholar passed the royal examinations, with the absolute highest honors. He was quickly given a powerful position, in the grand royal court. The weaver wept tears of absolute joy, believing their hard days were finally over. But power and wealth can quickly blind a fragile human heart. The scholar moved into a grand, glittering palace. He surrounded himself with rich, powerful nobles. He soon felt deeply embarrassed by the humble weaver who had supported him. One cold afternoon, he sent a royal guard to her small house. The guard handed her a small bag of silver coins, and a brief, heartless letter. The scholar commanded her to never speak his name again. He announced he was going to marry the beautiful daughter of a wealthy general. The weaver was completely devastated. Her entire world collapsed into dark, suffocating ruins. She had given him her youth, her health, and her entire heart. She went to a quiet mountain temple, and she wept bitterly before a wise, elderly monk. She asked the monk the exact question that burns in our own chests. She asked why her pure goodness was rewarded with such cruel betrayal. She felt that the laws of the universe were completely broken and deeply unfair. She felt punished for being a good person. The wise monk sat in deep, peaceful silence. He looked at the weeping weaver, with eyes full of vast compassion. He told her that her vision was limited to this single, short lifetime. He gently explained the hidden workings of the karmic mirror. He asked her to look beyond her current pain, and understand the deep river of time. In a very distant past life, the roles were completely reversed. The weaver was once a wealthy, arrogant merchant, traveling through a dangerous mountain pass. The scholar was a poor, humble guide, who bravely risked his own life to save her from cruel bandits. The merchant had promised the guide a great reward for saving her life. But when she finally reached safety, she simply walked away. She completely forgot her sacred promise, leaving the guide behind. The poor guide suffered terribly, and died in deep poverty, feeling utterly betrayed. The monk explained softly that the invisible thread of that broken promise had bound their souls together across time. In this present lifetime, the weaver had instinctively worked day and night to repay that ancient, unpaid debt. She gave her wealth and her care, because her soul remembered what was owed. The monk smiled gently, and spoke words of profound healing. He told her to wipe her tired tears, and to feel a deep sense of relief. The heavy debt of the past was finally paid in full. The invisible thread was completely cut. She was now totally free to walk her own path, without any karmic burden. Her pure kindness in this life was not a foolish mistake. It was a beautiful, noble action that completely purified her own soul. This ancient story holds a powerful, transformative truth for all of us. When someone leaves you, despite all your love and sacrifice, it is not a cruel punishment. It is very often the natural closing of an ancient karmic chapter. You might have owed them a debt of care, from a totally forgotten time. By loving them so deeply, and giving them your best, you have balanced the scales of the universe. You have paid your heavy debt, with the pure gold of your own kindness. You must never regret being a good and loving person. Your goodness belongs entirely to you. It is your own spiritual wealth, and no one can ever take it away. Their betrayal, and their sudden coldness, belongs entirely to them. It is their own new karma, which they will have to balance, in their own future time. You do not need to carry their heavy burden, or feel responsible for their blind choices. You have done your part beautifully, and your soul is clean. Understanding this karmic mirror, brings a massive sense of peace to a troubled mind. You stop seeing yourself, as a helpless victim of a cruel world. You see yourself as a brave soul, who has successfully completed a very difficult task. You can look at the person who hurt you, and quietly whisper a word of gratitude. You can thank them for giving you the chance, to clear your past debts. You can bless them on their way, and gracefully close the door behind them. This is the supreme wisdom, of accepting the laws of cause and effect. It completely frees your mind, from endless, torturous questions. It allows you to sleep peacefully at night, knowing the universe is always in perfect balance. Every single tear you shed in pure love, washes away a dark stain from your past. Every act of unselfish giving, builds a bright and solid foundation, for your own future happiness. You are walking towards a much lighter, and brighter future. But knowing this truth, is only the very first step on the journey of true healing. Even when we understand the karmic balance perfectly well, the human ego still feels a deep sting. The ego wants absolute justice right now, in this very moment. It wants to see the other person suffer, exactly as we have suffered. It wants to scream out loud, and demand an immediate, tearful apology. When we allow these dark thoughts to grow silently in our minds, we invite a terrible danger into our fragile hearts. We risk turning our pure, clean soul, into a dark and bitter wasteland. We risk creating new, heavy karma, that will bind us to our pain forever. What exactly happens inside us, when we completely refuse to forgive? What happens to our own physical and spiritual body, when we hold tightly to burning anger? We must explore the silent, destructive power of resentment, and clearly see how it slowly poisons our entire life. You have understood the profound truth of the karmic mirror. You have seen how the universe balances every action. But a dark shadow might still linger, in the quiet corners of your mind. It is the burning, painful fire of resentment. We often believe, that our anger is a protective shield. We think it protects us, from being deeply hurt again. We hold on to our bitter memories, like a very tight fist. We deeply want the person who wronged us, to feel our intense pain. We want the universe to deliver immediate justice. But there is a terrible, hidden truth, inside this burning anger. Holding on to resentment, is exactly like drinking deadly poison. You drink the bitter poison yourself, and you expect the other person to suffer. Let me share a completely new story, from a fertile and golden valley. There lived a strong, hard-working farmer. He poured his entire life, into tending his green fields. One dry summer, his neighbor secretly diverted the main river water. The farmer lost his entire precious harvest, and his fields completely dried up. He was immediately consumed, by a dark and raging fury. He went to the village blacksmith, and he forged a heavy iron chain. He attached the thick chain, to a massive, dark stone. He swore a solemn, angry oath. He promised to never remove the heavy chain, until his neighbor was severely punished. Days quickly turned into long, bitter months. The farmer dragged the heavy stone, everywhere he went. He dragged it to the busy village market, and he dragged it through his empty fields. The heavy iron chain cut deeply, into his tired and bleeding waist. His strong body grew weak, and his mind became completely exhausted. He could no longer plant any new seeds, because the stone was simply too heavy. He could no longer sleep peacefully at night, because the chain was far too tight. His entire existence revolved around the heavy stone of his anger. One warm afternoon, a wandering healer visited the quiet valley. He saw the struggling farmer, pulling the massive stone in the dirt. The healer approached gently, and asked the farmer a simple question. He asked why he chose to carry such a terrible and heavy burden. The farmer shouted loudly, with intense and burning anger. He said the dark stone represented the extreme cruelty of his neighbor. He said he must carry it every day, to show the whole world his deep pain. He wanted everyone to know how terribly he had been wronged. The wise healer looked at the exhausted farmer, with deep and gentle eyes. He pointed his hand toward the neighboring farm, across the wide river. The neighbor was singing happily in his green fields, completely unaware of the farmer. The neighbor was living his own life, totally untouched by the heavy stone. The healer spoke softly to the angry and broken farmer. Your neighbor stole your harvest, for only one single season. But you have stolen your own entire life, for many long and bitter years. The heavy chain around your waist is not punishing your careless neighbor. It is only destroying your own physical body, and crushing your own beautiful spirit. By holding tightly onto this heavy stone, you have become your own cruelest enemy. You are punishing yourself every single day, for a crime you did not even commit. This powerful story is a perfect, clear mirror, for our own unhealed human hearts. When someone betrays our deep trust, they hurt us only one time. But when we constantly replay the betrayal in our minds, we hurt ourselves 1,000 times over. We forge a heavy, invisible iron chain, out of our own bitter memories. We drag the heavy stone of resentment into our daily routines. We bring it into our bright new relationships, and we bring it into our quiet nights. We lose our precious, vibrant energy, and we completely lose our inner peace. The person who hurt us might be walking freely in the world. They might be completely oblivious to our silent and heavy suffering. They have already moved on, while we are firmly trapped in a dark prison. And the most tragic part is, we built this dark prison ourselves. You must deeply realize that forgiveness is not a gift you give to them. Forgiveness is the most profound gift you can ever give to your own soul. It is the brave and necessary act of cutting the heavy iron chain. Forgiving someone does not mean that you approve of their bad actions. It does not mean you invite them back into your sacred space. It simply means that you completely refuse to carry their heavy stone anymore. You refuse to let their past mistakes dictate your present joy and happiness. You must look closely at your own hands and see the tight fist of anger. You must slowly and gently open your tired fingers. You must let the burning coals of resentment fall entirely to the ground. When you drop the heavy stone, you will immediately feel an incredible rush of pure freedom. The world around you will suddenly look brighter, and your breathing will become deeply calm. Your energy will return to your body, like a fresh spring rain. You reclaim your absolute power, taking it back from the person who hurt you. You declare to the universe that your peaceful mind is far more valuable than a bitter need for revenge. You choose to wash your hands clean and step completely out of the dark river of anger. But as you make this brave decision to drop the stone, you might face a new and delicate challenge. You might wonder how to truly empty your mind of these deeply rooted and painful memories. You might ask yourself how to effectively clean the invisible wounds that have been open for so very long. We must learn a very specific and gentle practice to slowly untangle the tight knots inside our chest. You have made the brave choice to drop the heavy stone of anger. You have decided to walk away from the bitter poison. But a very quiet question still lingers in your mind. How do you truly let go of a memory that is deeply embedded in your soul? We often misunderstand the true meaning of letting go. We think it means wiping our memory completely clean. We think we must magically forget the person who hurt us. But the human brain is not a simple slate that can be wiped perfectly blank. Trying to force yourself to forget is entirely impossible. The harder you try to push a memory away, the stronger it bounces back. It is like trying to push a wooden ball deep under the water. The moment you release your tired hands, the ball shoots violently back up to the surface. True letting go is something completely different. It is not the act of forgetting. It is the beautiful art of remembering without the sharp pain. It is looking at the past and feeling a deep, undisturbed peace. To understand this delicate process, we must learn from the humble workers of the sea. In a small coastal village, there lived an old, experienced fisherman. His hands were rough, and his face was deeply weathered by the salty wind. Every evening, he sat quietly on the sandy beach. He had a very specific and highly respected skill. He was the master of untangling the most complicated fishing nets. Sometimes, a massive storm would suddenly hit the dark ocean. The strong, violent waves would toss the fishing boats around. The long nets would get violently twisted into massive, impossible knots. The younger fishermen would bring these ruined nets to the old master. They would be incredibly frustrated and full of restless energy. A young fisherman once brought a net that was completely tangled into a tight, heavy ball. The young man was very angry, and he violently pulled at the thick ropes. He yanked the strings with all his strength, desperately trying to force the knots open. But his aggressive pulling only made the tough knots significantly tighter. The rough rope began to cut deeply into his bleeding hands. He finally threw the net on the sand, completely defeated. The old fisherman smiled gently, and picked up the heavy, tangled net. He sat down on a small wooden stool, and he began to breathe very slowly. He did not pull the ropes, and he did not force anything apart. He simply looked closely at the complex twists with absolute, quiet patience. He gently loosened a small loop here, and he softly pushed a thin thread there. His movements were incredibly slow, and completely relaxed. He worked with the tangled net, exactly as if he was calming a frightened animal. He spoke softly to the frustrated young man, sitting beside him on the sand. He said that a tight knot is simply a frightened piece of rope. If you attack it with blind anger, it will only defend itself by becoming much tighter. You can never defeat a knot with aggressive force. You can only dissolve it with vast and gentle patience. You must create enough empty space inside the tight knot so the rope can naturally find its own way out. After a few quiet hours, the massive, impossible ball of rope was completely straight and perfectly useful again. Your deeply wounded heart is exactly like that tangled fishing net. When a painful betrayal happens, your delicate emotions get violently twisted. Fear, sadness, and anger become completely knotted together inside your chest. When you desperately try to pull the pain out, you use aggressive force against your own soul. You demand the pain to disappear immediately. You judge yourself harshly for still feeling sad after so many long months. But this internal violence only makes the emotional knots much tighter. It traps the heavy pain even deeper inside your physical body. To untangle the complex knots of the heart, you must become exactly like the old, wise fisherman. You must sit quietly with your own pain, and look at it with immense, gentle patience. When a bitter memory arises in your mind, do not violently push it away. Do not get angry at yourself for simply remembering the past. Just sit perfectly still, and gently observe the painful thought. Breathe softly into the tight space in your chest. Give the heavy memory enough empty room to simply exist for a passing moment. You silently say to your own heart that it is completely okay to feel sad. You acknowledge the deep wound without adding any new judgment. By doing this gentle practice, you slowly loosen the tight, emotional loop. You stop fighting the dark memory. And when you stop fighting, the memory completely loses its sharp, dangerous power over you. The image of the person who betrayed you will still remain in your mind. But it will slowly become just an ordinary image, completely stripped of its heavy emotional weight. You will eventually be able to look back at the days you shared together. You will see the beautiful moments without feeling a crushing sense of loss. You will see the bitter ending without feeling a burning desire for revenge. The past will simply become a quiet, closed chapter in the great book of your life. It will sit peacefully on the shelf of your mind, gathering quiet dust. This is the ultimate, glorious victory of true healing. You do not lose your precious memories, but you completely win back your freedom. You untangle the heavy ropes, and you are finally ready to sail again. You are ready to cast your clean, unbroken net into the vast and beautiful ocean of life. You realize that a heart that has been broken and carefully untangled is far more spacious than before. It has a much deeper capacity for true understanding and profound empathy. You have transformed a terrible tragedy into a magnificent tool for spiritual growth. As the heavy knots finally dissolve, a fresh and gentle breeze enters your soul. You open your clear eyes, and you begin to see the world in a totally new light. You start to notice something truly remarkable about the sudden departures that caused you so much pain. You begin to look beyond the immediate shock of the loss. You start to wonder if the universe was actually completely reorganizing your path. You might start to see that what felt like a cruel ending was actually a completely necessary clearing. It is time to discover the hidden, profound blessing that is secretly wrapped inside the changing of human hearts. When a severe storm destroys a beautiful garden, we often weep bitterly for the broken flowers. We look at the scattered leaves, and we feel a profound sense of loss. We firmly believe that the beauty has vanished forever. But we entirely forget a fundamental law of nature. The violent storm also brings the heavy rain. And the heavy rain is exactly what the dry soil desperately needs. We only see the painful destruction on the surface. We completely fail to see the hidden preparation happening deep underground. When a person suddenly leaves your life, it feels exactly like a terrible storm. They uproot your daily routines, and they shatter your future plans. They leave behind a massive, frightening empty space in your heart. You stare at this terrifying emptiness, and you feel entirely lost. You desperately want to fill the void with the exact same person. You pray for the old days to return, completely unchanged. But the wise teachers of the past looked at emptiness with a totally different view. There is a profound story, recorded in an ancient mountain monastery. The monastery had a vast, enclosed courtyard. In the very center of this quiet courtyard, stood a massive, ancient tree. It was the absolute pride of the temple. Its thick branches reached wide across the sky, completely blocking the sun. A dedicated temple gardener loved this magnificent tree with all his heart. He spent every single day sweeping the dry leaves around its huge roots. He watered the old tree faithfully, and he rested in its cool shade. He believed this single tree was the entire purpose of his garden. Because the thick canopy blocked all the bright sunlight, nothing else could ever grow. The soil beneath the giant tree was completely bare and dark. There were no bright flowers, and there was no soft green grass. But the dedicated gardener did not mind this at all. He was entirely satisfied with his one familiar companion. Then one dark night, a fierce and unprecedented storm struck the quiet mountain. The howling wind violently shook the ancient temple walls. The thunder roared loudly, shaking the very earth. A massive lightning bolt struck the courtyard, hitting the giant tree directly. With a terrifying crash, the ancient giant fell to the completely ruined ground. When the morning sun finally rose, the gardener walked out into the courtyard. He fell to his knees, and he wept in absolute agony. The center of his world was completely destroyed. His beloved tree was nothing more than broken wood and ash. For many long and bitter months, the gardener refused to clean the courtyard. He sat by the broken stump, mourning his terrible and unfair loss. He believed his beautiful garden was completely dead forever. He felt there was absolutely no reason to ever smile or hope again. But the great wheel of the seasons never stops turning for human sorrow. The cold winter slowly melted away, and the gentle spring finally arrived. Because the giant tree was completely gone, the warm spring sunlight poured directly into the courtyard. For the very first time in many decades, the bright sun touched the bare, dark soil. The gentle spring rain soaked deeply into the warm earth. One quiet morning, the grieving gardener noticed something entirely unexpected. Tiny, vibrant green shoots were pushing bravely through the dark soil. He watched in absolute silence and deep wonder over the next few weeks. The empty, ruined courtyard completely transformed into a breathtaking paradise. Thousands of rare, colorful wildflowers bloomed brilliantly in the warm sun. Beautiful green vines climbed gracefully up the old stone walls. The air was suddenly filled with the sweet fragrance of blossoms, and the joyful songs of visiting birds. The gardener fell to his knees once again, but this time, he wept tears of profound realization. He finally understood the magnificent secret of the fallen tree. The giant tree he loved so much had actually been starving the entire garden. Its massive, heavy shadow had prevented all the other beautiful seeds from growing. The painful storm was not a cruel punishment from the universe. It was a completely necessary intervention to bring the hidden garden back to life. The violent destruction of the old was the exact requirement for the birth of the new. This ancient and beautiful story is a perfect reflection of your own broken heart. The person who walked away from you was exactly like that giant, overshadowing tree. You loved them with your entire being, and you made them the absolute center of your world. You rested in their familiar shade, completely satisfied with their presence. But you did not realize that their massive presence was blocking your own sunlight. Perhaps their heavy demands took up all your precious energy. Perhaps you stopped exploring your own unique passions, simply to keep them entirely happy. Their sudden departure felt like a completely devastating storm. It left you staring at a bare, empty courtyard inside your soul. But you must gently realize the incredible truth of this moment. The thick shadow has finally been removed. The warm, healing sunlight is now pouring directly into your own life. The empty space they left behind is not a dead and barren wasteland. It is a deeply fertile ground, completely ready for a magnificent new spring. Because you are no longer pouring all your energy into one person, you have energy for yourself. You have the precious time to discover who you truly are, without their constant shadow. There are thousands of dormant seeds, quietly waiting inside your own soul. Talents you completely forgot about, and dreams you silently abandoned long ago. These beautiful seeds are now feeling the warm sunlight, for the very first time. You will soon see completely new strengths, blooming brightly within you. You will attract new, wonderful friends, who will appreciate the flowers of your true self. You will discover a vibrant, colorful life, that you never even imagined was possible. You simply could not see this glorious future, while you were completely trapped in the dark shade. The universe sometimes removes a person from your life, to aggressively protect your own destiny. The universe sees the grand, beautiful garden you are meant to become. And it knows that you can never fully bloom, if you remain hidden in the dark. So the painful storm is sent to uproot the heavy attachment. It hurts terribly in the immediate moment, because endings always bring sharp tears. But as you wipe your tired eyes, and slowly look at the newly opened sky, you must breathe in the fresh air. You must gently whisper a word of profound gratitude, to the storm that broke your heart. You must deeply thank the empty space, for giving you the absolute freedom to finally grow. You have survived the bitter winter of betrayal, and your glorious spring is just beginning. But to truly embrace this vibrant new season, you must deeply understand another subtle trap of the human mind. Even when we see the beautiful flowers blooming, we still try to dictate how they should grow. We still desperately want the entire universe to strictly follow our personal schedule. We suffer heavily because we constantly try to control the unpredictable wind and the wild waves. We must ask a very important question. What happens to our fragile peace, when we try to command the uncontrollable forces of life? We look at the beautiful new garden blooming inside us, and we feel a brief moment of peace. But very soon, a familiar and dangerous habit returns to our mind. We start looking closely at the wild, colorful flowers. We suddenly want them to grow in perfectly straight lines. We want to decide exactly when the rain should fall, and when the wind should blow. We carry a deeply rooted illusion, inside our fragile human hearts. It is the heavy and exhausting illusion, of absolute control. We suffer incredibly heavy pain in this life. But we do not suffer because the world is inherently cruel. We suffer because we constantly demand the entire universe to strictly obey our personal wishes. We want to be the supreme rulers of our own tiny kingdoms. When a person we love decides to leave, we feel a terrible loss of control. We desperately try to force them to stay, using anger or heavy guilt. We believe that if we just try hard enough, we can completely bend their will to match our own. But attempting to control another human heart is an utterly foolish battle. Let us journey to a grand and ancient coastal empire. There lived a very proud and incredibly powerful king. He had conquered many distant lands, with his massive and fearless armies. Every single person in his grand palace bowed deeply when he walked by. His word was the absolute and undeniable law. If he demanded a mountain to be moved, thousands of workers would break the stones. If he demanded a forest to be cut down, the ancient trees would fall by sunset. The king became completely intoxicated by his own immense power. He honestly believed he was the absolute master of the entire world. He believed there was absolutely nothing that could ever defy his royal commands. One bright morning, the proud king walked along the beautiful sandy beach. He was surrounded by his loyal guards and his flattering ministers. The ministers constantly whispered sweet lies into his royal ears. They told him his power was entirely limitless. They said even the vast forces of nature would gladly bow to his ultimate greatness. The king smiled proudly, and he decided to formally prove his divine authority. He ordered his servants to bring his heavy, golden throne down to the wet sand. He sat down heavily on the throne, right at the very edge of the foaming water. The tide was slowly and steadily coming into the shore. The king raised his golden scepter high, and he pointed it fiercely at the vast, dark ocean. He shouted loudly into the salty wind, commanding the waves to immediately stop. He firmly ordered the rising tide to retreat back into the deep sea. He demanded the ocean to completely respect his royal presence. The flattering ministers held their breath, completely terrified by his bold arrogance. But the vast and ancient ocean completely ignored the screaming king. The water has no ears for human commands, and it has no fear of golden crowns. The tide simply followed the quiet, invisible pull of the distant moon. The cold waves continued to roll forward, completely unchanged and completely unbothered. First, the salty water washed over the king's leather boots. Then, it soaked the bottom of his heavy, expensive silk robes. The king screamed even louder, his face turning bright red with intense fury. He threatened the ocean with terrible and severe punishments. But a massive, powerful wave suddenly crashed against the shore, completely soaking the king from head to toe. The royal crown fell into the wet sand, and the king sat shivering in the cold water. The grand illusion of his absolute power was completely shattered in a single, humiliating moment. The king finally understood his own foolishness. He realized he was just a tiny, fragile human being, sitting before the vast and uncontrollable forces of life. We often laugh at the pure arrogance of this foolish king. But we completely fail to see that we do the exact same thing every single day. We set up our own tiny thrones, right on the edge of the emotional ocean. We look at the people in our lives, and we issue our silent, desperate commands. We command them to always be perfectly loyal. We command them to never change their minds. We order the tide of their affection to stay permanently high. And when the natural tide of their heart begins to pull away, we get incredibly angry. We scream at the natural waves of change, completely demanding them to stop. We feel personally insulted by the universe, exactly like the soaked and shivering king. We truly believe that our intense love gives us the supreme authority to control another person's path. But the human heart is exactly like the vast, deep ocean. It is completely governed by its own mysterious currents and its own hidden, unseen depths. It will never obey the demanding shouts of an anxious and fearful ego. The more you try to control the people around you, the more exhausted and soaked you will become. You will spend your entire life fighting a losing battle against the natural tides of existence. The supreme wisdom of peace begins the very moment you step down from your imaginary throne. You must leave the heavy, golden crown on the completely empty beach. You must take a few steps back and simply admire the magnificent, roaring ocean. You allow the tide to come in, and you allow the tide to gracefully roll out. You finally realize that true safety is never found in controlling the external world. True safety is deeply knowing how to swim in the unpredictable waters. When you stop demanding the world to obey you, a massive weight is instantly lifted from your tired shoulders. You stop trying to forcefully fix every single relationship. You stop trying to manipulate the natural outcome of events. You surrender beautifully to the natural rhythm of the universe, and you find a profound, unshakable calm inside your chest. But when you finally drop the grand illusion of control, and you let people walk away freely, a very deep and fragile fear might suddenly arise. You might watch the departing waves and feel a sudden, crushing sense of worthlessness. You might quietly wonder if their departure somehow diminishes your own internal value. You might ask yourself how to stand tall when the people you trusted most are entirely gone. It is time to turn our gentle gaze entirely inward and discover the bright, unbreakable core of your true spirit. When the loud storm of betrayal finally passes, a very deep and quiet silence remains. You look around the empty rooms of your life. You see the empty spaces where a beloved person used to be. A sudden and terrifying thought often strikes the human heart in this lonely moment. We look at their sudden departure, and we secretly blame ourselves. We think we were not good enough to make them stay. We believe that when they walked away, they took all our value with them. We feel completely empty, exactly like a discarded shell on the beach. But we must look deeply into this painful illusion. We must understand the profound difference between human perception and true spiritual value. Let us travel to an ancient, bustling trading city. In the center of the grand market, there was a humble merchant. He sold ordinary clay pots and simple wooden bowls. One day, a poor traveler traded him a very strange, heavy stone. The stone was completely covered in thick, dark mud. It looked completely useless, and very ugly. The merchant simply tossed it into a dark corner, completely ignoring it for many years. One cold evening, a master jeweler visited the humble shop. He was looking for a simple bowl to drink his warm soup. As he walked past the dark corner, his sharp eyes noticed something incredible. He saw a tiny, brilliant spark of light, shining through a small crack in the mud. He immediately bought the dirty stone for a few copper coins. The humble merchant laughed loudly, thinking the jeweler was a complete fool. He was very happy to get rid of the useless, ugly rock. The master jeweler took the stone back to his quiet workshop. He sat down patiently, and began to wash the dark mud away. He used warm water, and a very soft piece of cloth. As the thick mud slowly washed off, a breathtaking beauty was finally revealed. Hidden inside that dirty crust was the most magnificent diamond the city had ever seen. It was completely flawless, and it shone with the brilliant light of 1,000 stars. The diamond was immediately taken to the royal palace, and placed in the king's glorious crown. The humble merchant simply lacked the vision to see the true treasure. He looked at the rough outside, and completely missed the brilliant inside. But we must ask a very important question. Did the diamond ever lose its true value, while it was sitting in the dark corner? Did it become less beautiful, just because a foolish merchant threw it in the dirt? The absolute truth is, the diamond was always perfect. Its magnificent value never changed, not even for a single second. The merchant's total ignorance did not alter the reality of the diamond. This beautiful story holds a profound mirror to your own fragile heart. When someone leaves you, or betrays your deep trust, they are exactly like that humble merchant. They simply lack the spiritual vision to see your true and magnificent worth. They look at your pure heart, and they do not understand its incredible value. They might treat you carelessly, or throw your precious love away. But their blind actions have absolutely nothing to do with your true worth. Your value does not decrease, simply because someone failed to see it. You are exactly like that flawless, shining diamond. Your worth is deeply intrinsic, and entirely unbreakable. It was completely given to you by the universe, the very moment you were born. You do not need another person to validate your beautiful existence. You do not need their constant approval to make you feel whole. When they pack their bags and leave, they only take their own belongings. They take their own confusion, and their own limited vision. They can never pack your inner light into their heavy suitcases. Your pure kindness, your gentle patience, and your loving spirit remain entirely within you. They are completely untouched by the changing winds of other people. Knowing this profound truth is the absolute foundation of rebuilding your shattered trust. We often think that rebuilding trust means trusting other people not to hurt us again. But this is a very dangerous and exhausting misunderstanding. You can never guarantee what another human being will do. People will always be unpredictable, and the world will always change. True trust is never about controlling the outside world. True trust is an unshakable belief in your own inner strength. It is the deep, quiet knowledge that you will perfectly survive any emotional storm. You trust yourself to heal if someone breaks your heart again. You trust your own legs to stand firmly on the ground when the earth violently shakes. You trust your own bright light to guide you safely through the darkest and coldest nights. When you deeply trust your own unbreakable core, the terrible fear of abandonment completely disappears. You stop desperately begging people to stay, because you know you are completely whole without them. You can welcome new people into your life, with a beautifully open and relaxed heart. If they choose to stay, you share your bright light with them. If they choose to leave, you gracefully let them go. You simply wave goodbye, knowing your diamond is perfectly safe inside your own chest. You do not build heavy walls to keep the painful world out. You remain deeply open and deeply vulnerable because you know your core can never be destroyed. This is the ultimate, quiet confidence of an awakened soul. It is a profound peace that radiates from within, totally independent of external circumstances. You become an absolute master of your own inner kingdom. You treat yourself with the highest respect, exactly like the master jeweler treated the rare diamond. You carefully wash away the dark mud of self-doubt, and you let your true light shine brightly for everyone to see. But as you walk confidently with this new, quiet strength, you will still encounter very difficult days. The journey of human life is very long, and new storms will inevitably arise on the horizon. The fierce winds of change will blow heavily against your face. You will need a specific way to remain entirely flexible when the intense emotional winds try to break your spirit. We must look closely at the natural world to find the perfect teacher for this supreme resilience. Nature is always the greatest and most silent teacher. When you walk through a deep, ancient forest, you can learn the profound secrets of survival. Life will inevitably send fierce and terrifying storms your way. Betrayal and sudden loss will blow through your life, exactly like a violent hurricane. When these dark winds arrive, human beings usually make a very dangerous mistake. We immediately tense our bodies, and we harden our fragile hearts. We try to stand incredibly rigid, believing that sheer force will protect us from the pain. We build thick, solid walls around our emotions. But the ancient wisdom of the forest teaches us a completely different way to survive. Look at the massive, proud oak tree standing on the high hill. It has a thick, heavy trunk, and deeply buried roots. The oak tree is incredibly strong, and it is very proud of its immense power. When a gentle breeze blows, the oak tree does not move a single inch. It stands tall and rigid, completely ignoring the moving air. It believes it is the absolute master of the forest, completely untouchable by the changing elements. But one dark evening, a massive and terrifying typhoon strikes the high mountain. The wind howls with a deafening and violent anger. The proud oak tree decides to fight the raging storm. It uses all its massive strength to completely resist the terrible wind. It refuses to bend, and it refuses to yield to the natural force. But the wind is far too strong, and nature is far too powerful. The immense pressure becomes too much for the rigid wood to bear. With a sudden, terrifying crack, the massive trunk completely snaps in half. The proud oak tree is violently uprooted and thrown to the muddy ground. Its rigid strength became the exact cause of its tragic and sudden death. Now look at the humble bamboo grove, growing quietly in the lower valley. The bamboo is completely different from the proud oak. It is very slender, and it looks incredibly fragile. It does not have a thick trunk, and it does not have heavy, massive branches. When the violent typhoon hits the lower valley, the bamboo does not try to fight the raging wind. It completely surrenders its own body to the terrible force of the storm. It bends deeply, almost touching its green leaves to the wet dirt. The howling wind screams over the bamboo grove, pushing it flat against the earth. The bamboo simply stays low, completely yielding to the massive pressure. It does not resist the reality of the storm, and it does not demand the wind to stop. It accepts the terrifying moment, exactly as it is. When the dark morning finally arrives, the terrible typhoon completely passes. The wind dies down, and the bright sun returns to the quiet valley. The broken oak tree lies completely dead, on the high hill. But the humble bamboo slowly and gracefully rises back up to the clear sky. The bamboo is completely unharmed, and completely unbroken. It simply shook off the heavy rain, and continued its peaceful life. The beautiful secret of the bamboo lies in its supreme and absolute flexibility. It survives the most terrifying storms, because it is willing to bend completely. And there is another profound secret, hidden deep inside its green stem. The bamboo is completely empty on the inside. It does not carry the heavy, solid wood of a massive ego. Its emptiness is exactly what allows it to bend, without ever breaking its spine. When you face the terrible winds of betrayal, you must become exactly like the humble bamboo. When a sudden change shatters your world, do not try to be the rigid oak tree. Do not fight the painful reality, and do not resist the tears that desperately need to flow. If you tense your heart and try to block the heavy pain, you will violently break. Your spirit will snap completely, under the intense pressure of your own resistance. You must learn the gentle art of yielding. You must allow the pain to simply wash over you, without trying to aggressively stop it. You bend deeply to the ground, acknowledging the absolute reality of your heavy loss. You cry the bitter tears, and you feel the raw, aching sadness in your chest. You become completely empty on the inside, letting go of your proud ego. You let go of the heavy belief that this painful thing should not be happening to you. You simply accept that the terrible storm is here. By bending deeply with the pain, you actually protect your bright, inner core. You allow the dark wind to pass right over you, without ever destroying your beautiful soul. And just like the flexible bamboo, you will naturally rise again when the storm finally ends. You will stand tall in the warm sunlight, completely unbroken by the tragic experience. Your supreme flexibility becomes your absolute greatest strength in this fragile world. You learn to flow gracefully with the unpredictable changes of life, instead of constantly fighting them. You become deeply resilient, capable of surviving any emotional typhoon the universe ever sends your way. But surviving the violent storm is only one part of the journey. When you finally stand back up, you will look around at the changed landscape. You will see the people who hurt you, and you will remember their cruel actions. In that quiet moment of recovery, you will face a very critical and defining choice. The way you choose to respond to those who wronged you will shape your entire future destiny. We must deeply examine the invisible seeds we plant when we react to the pain of the world. When the violent storm finally passes, you slowly stand back up on your feet. You look around at the broken pieces of your life, and you see the person who caused the terrible damage. A very dark and powerful temptation often rises in the quiet human heart in this exact moment. It is the burning desire for immediate revenge. Your wounded ego screams loudly in your chest. It demands that the other person must suffer, exactly as you have suffered. You want them to feel the sharp pain of betrayal, deep in their own bones. You want to throw the bitter poison, right back into their careless face. But the enlightened teachers of the past warned us deeply about this dangerous trap. They taught us a profound truth about the echo of our own actions. Every single reaction you have is a brand new seed planted in the soil of your future. If you plant a dark seed of anger, you will inevitably harvest a massive tree of bitterness. If you choose the path of revenge, you are simply continuing the endless cycle of human suffering. To understand this delicate balance, we must travel to a very hot and dusty road, near a busy river crossing. A wise and completely silent traveler was walking peacefully toward a distant green mountain. He carried absolutely nothing with him, except a small wooden walking stick, and a simple begging bowl. He arrived at a small, crowded village, just as the hot sun was finally setting. The villagers in this particular town were deeply unhappy and completely full of bitter anger. Their lives were very hard, and their hearts were entirely closed to the beauty of the world. They saw the peaceful traveler walking gracefully, and his calm face made them incredibly furious. They felt personally insulted by his deep inner peace. They immediately surrounded him on the narrow dusty road, completely blocking his path forward. They began to shout terrible and cruel insults at him. They called him wicked names, and they aggressively mocked his simple, ragged clothes. Some of the angry villagers picked up dark, wet mud from the side of the road. They threw the heavy mud directly at his clean robes, staining his clothes with dark dirt. They desperately wanted to see him break down in tears. They wanted to see his face twist in anger, and they wanted him to scream back at them. They wanted to completely drag his pure and soaring spirit down into their own dark and miserable swamp. But the wise traveler did not say a single angry word. He did not raise his wooden stick to defend himself, and he did not try to run away in fear. He simply stood there perfectly still, in the middle of the dusty road. He breathed very slowly and softly, keeping his heart completely open. He looked at their furious, red faces, with eyes full of absolute and deep compassion. He saw their hidden pain, pouring out as aggressive anger. After many long and exhausting hours, the violent villagers grew completely tired. Their dry throats ached from screaming so loudly, and their heavy hands were tired from throwing dirt. They finally stopped their cruel attack, completely confused and entirely defeated by his absolute silence. The traveler gently lifted his hand, and wiped the dark mud from his calm face. He looked directly at the oldest village elder, and he asked a very simple, quiet question. He asked the elder to imagine a very specific situation. He said, if someone offers you a very heavy and ugly gift, and you completely refuse to accept it, he asked who the gift truly belongs to. The village elder frowned deeply, thinking about the strange question. The elder finally answered with absolute certainty. The elder stated clearly, that the gift obviously remains with the person who originally tried to give it. The wise traveler smiled a very gentle and beautiful smile, slowly nodding his head. He told the quiet crowd, that they were exactly right. He said that all afternoon, they had offered him a massive gift of blazing anger, and a heavy box of bitter insults. But he announced clearly, that he completely refused to accept their dark and heavy gifts. He said he was leaving their cruel words, right there on the dusty village road. He told them the anger belonged entirely to them, and they must carry that heavy poison back into their own homes. The traveler then gracefully turned around, and continued walking peacefully toward the distant mountain. He was entirely untouched by their cruel storm, leaving the villagers standing in absolute, stunned silence. This ancient and powerful story is a profound lesson for your own difficult healing journey. When someone betrays your deep trust, they are essentially handing you a very heavy gift of pain. They are offering you a dark, wooden box, completely filled with bitter resentment and sharp anger. If you choose to scream back at them, you are eagerly accepting their dark gift. If you sit in the dark and plan a cruel revenge, you are carrying their heavy box directly into your own clean home. You are allowing their bad karma to completely infect your own pure and beautiful soul. Revenge is a very dangerous and highly deceptive illusion. It promises a quick and satisfying relief to your wounded ego. But it only delivers a long, agonizing, and terrible spiritual sickness. When you try to aggressively hurt the person who hurt you, you tie your soul to theirs with a thick, unbreakable iron chain. You remain eternally bound to the exact source of your deepest agony. The great and flawless will of karma does not need your personal help to balance the vast universe. The universe has its own perfect memory, and its own completely flawless accounting system. Every action carries its own natural consequence, just as a shadow follows a walking body. You must bravely choose the supreme and noble path of grace. Grace is never a weak surrender to bad behavior, and it is never a foolish sign of defeat. Grace is the ultimate and absolute display of immense spiritual strength. It is the brave and conscious decision to completely break the vicious, endless cycle of human pain. You look directly at the person who offered you the bitter poison. You gently shake your head, and you absolutely refuse to drink a single drop of it. You leave their heavy karma right at their own front door. You turn around and walk away, with a completely clean conscience and a deeply peaceful heart. By choosing this beautiful and silent grace, you elevate your entire human existence. You completely transform a dirty puddle of mud into a crystal clear and reflecting pool of wisdom. You protect your own precious energy, saving it for the beautiful new life you are building. But looking at the people who hurt us with pure and genuine grace requires a very special and rare kind of vision. It is incredibly difficult to stay calm when the wounds are still fresh and bleeding. It requires us to look far past their cruel and careless actions to see the hidden reality underneath their skin. We must pause and ask ourselves why people do terrible things to the ones who love them the most. We must discover the profound and ultimate healing power of truly seeing their hidden, silent suffering. To truly heal from a devastating betrayal, we must learn to look completely past the surface. When someone hurts us deeply, our immediate reaction is to see them as a cruel monster. We look at the sharp blade of their actions, and we feel the terrible, bleeding wound they left behind. It is very natural to feel intense anger, and it is very human to demand strict justice. We naturally assume that their terrible actions were driven by pure malice. But if we want to completely free our own hearts, we must look much deeper into the complex human mind. We must discover the hidden, and often tragic truth, behind human cruelty. Let us journey to a high, snowy mountain pass, in a very distant time. A terrifying bandit ruled the narrow, rocky roads. He was completely famous for his cruel heart, and his absolute lack of mercy. He violently took everything from travelers, leaving them with absolutely nothing in the freezing cold. Everyone in the lower valleys spoke of him as a complete demon. One cold morning, a gentle monk walked directly into the dangerous mountain pass. The angry bandit jumped out from behind the dark rocks, aggressively raising his heavy weapon. He threatened the monk with terrible violence, fully expecting the monk to beg for his life. But the gentle monk did not show a single trace of fear. He did not run away in panic, and he did not plead for his safety. He simply stood there perfectly still, and looked deeply into the wild, furious eyes of the cruel bandit. The monk did not see a terrifying, evil monster. With his deeply awakened vision, he saw a completely broken, and severely traumatized human being. He saw a man who had been completely abandoned as a small child, left to starve in the bitter winter snow. The monk clearly saw the massive, violent wall that the bandit had built around his fragile heart. The bandit had built this thick wall, simply to survive a brutal and uncaring world. His cruelty was never a sign of true strength. His cruelty was exactly like a thick layer of heavy armor, desperately hiding a terrified and weeping soul. The gentle monk breathed softly, and spoke with a voice full of vast, warm compassion. He told the fierce bandit that he was very sorry. He was deeply sorry that the world had been so incredibly cold and cruel to him. He acknowledged the deep, silent pain that the bandit had carried entirely alone for so many long years. The heavy weapon slowly fell from the trembling hands of the bandit. The thick armor of his violent ego completely shattered in a single, quiet second. For the very first time in his entire life, someone had actually seen his hidden, silent agony. He fell heavily to his knees on the cold stones, and wept exactly like a small, lost child. The terrible mountain monster disappeared completely, leaving only a deeply wounded human being, desperately in need of healing. This powerful and moving story reveals a profound truth about human nature. When people act with incredible cruelty, or when they suddenly betray your deep trust, they are rarely acting out of pure, calculated evil. They are almost always acting exactly like the wounded, terrified bandit. They are running blindly from their own deep and unresolved suffering. They carry invisible, completely infected wounds, deep inside their own minds. Perhaps they carry a heavy, silent fear of true intimacy, deeply rooted in their own painful childhood. Perhaps they carry a massive, crushing insecurity, making them constantly seek validation from completely new people. They might actively sabotage a beautiful, safe relationship, simply because they secretly feel they do not deserve true happiness. They violently break things, before those beautiful things have a chance to break them. It is a tragic, and very desperate defense mechanism. When they suddenly walk away and break your heart, they are usually trying to escape their own internal demons. They hurt you terribly, because their own internal world is a dark, chaotic storm. A person who is completely at peace with themselves, never goes around destroying the peace of other people. A truly happy and fulfilled soul, never betrays the people who love them the most. Cruelty and betrayal are always clear and tragic symptoms of a deeply unhappy mind. When you finally realize this profound truth, a massive shift happens inside your own chest. You completely stop taking their painful betrayal so personally. You finally understand that their sudden departure was actually never about your own worth. It was entirely about their own heavy baggage, and their own complete inability to carry it. You begin to look at the person who hurt you, through the clear and gentle eyes of pure compassion. Compassion does not mean you foolishly excuse their terrible behavior. It does not mean you allow them to keep hurting you, over and over again. You must still maintain very firm, and healthy boundaries, to fiercely protect your own precious energy. But true compassion means, you completely stop hating them. You look at their chaotic, deeply confused life, and you feel a genuine sense of sorrow for their daily suffering. You realize how incredibly exhausting it must be, to live inside a mind completely filled with fear, and endless discontent. You silently bless them on their very difficult journey, truly hoping they will eventually find the peace they desperately lack. This gentle, internal shift from burning anger to deep compassion, is the absolute peak of emotional maturity. It completely cools the burning fire in your chest, and it gently washes away the bitter poison of resentment. Your heart becomes incredibly soft, and incredibly vast, exactly like the clear blue sky above the mountains. You forgive them entirely, because you finally see the heavy, invisible chains binding their confused soul. You set them completely free from your angry expectations. And in doing so, you completely set yourself free. You are no longer a bitter victim, completely trapped in a tragic story of unfair betrayal. You are a wise and awakened observer, deeply understanding the complex and fragile nature of human suffering. But as you gracefully close the door on the painful past, you are left standing in a very quiet place. You have forgiven the person, and you have completely let go of the heavy anger. Yet, the physical space they once occupied in your daily life, is now completely empty. The house is very quiet, and the beautiful future you planned together has completely vanished into thin air. You are standing completely alone, in the middle of a vast and silent void. The silence can feel incredibly heavy, and deeply intimidating to a healing heart. How do we learn to live comfortably, inside this massive empty space? We must deeply explore the beautiful canvas of the void, and clearly see the hidden miracles waiting in the silence. When the door finally closes, a deep silence fills the room. The sudden quiet can feel completely terrifying. You look at the empty chair at your wooden table. You see the vast, empty space in your daily routine. We are deeply conditioned to be completely terrified of emptiness. We treat silence exactly like a dangerous enemy. When a loved one suddenly leaves, we panic at the massive void they leave behind. We immediately want to fill the quiet room with loud music or busy distractions. We desperately rush to find new people, just to avoid feeling completely alone. But this intense fear of the void is a profound misunderstanding of nature. To understand the true beauty of emptiness, we must visit an old art studio. In a quiet, sunlit room, there lived a legendary master painter. His beautiful paintings were completely famous, across the entire empire. He had a very eager, and highly ambitious young apprentice. The young apprentice wanted to create the most beautiful painting in the entire world. He took a massive, completely clean white canvas. He began to paint with bright, vibrant colors, filling every single corner. He painted tall green mountains, deep blue rivers, wild animals, and crowded cities. He did not leave a single inch of the canvas completely empty. When he proudly showed his finished work, the master painter simply sighed. The painting was incredibly chaotic, and extremely heavy to look at. The eyes had absolutely nowhere to rest, and the mind felt completely overwhelmed. The young apprentice was deeply confused, and asked the wise master what was wrong. The master painter picked up a small, completely fresh canvas. He took a single, thin brush, and dipped it in dark ink. With just a few graceful strokes, he painted a single, elegant bamboo branch. He left the entire rest of the canvas, completely blank and perfectly white. The master placed the two paintings, side by side on the wooden table. The masterpiece was incredibly breathtaking, radiating a profound and deep peace. The master pointed to the vast, white space on his simple painting. He told the young student a very profound and timeless secret. He said the true beauty of art does not exist only in the painted lines. The true magic exists entirely in the empty space around the lines. The emptiness is exactly what gives the bamboo the absolute freedom to breathe. Without the silent, empty background, the painted subject completely loses its deep meaning. This profound artistic lesson applies directly to the beautiful canvas of your life. We constantly try to crowd our daily existence with endless relationships and heavy attachments. We think a full life must be completely packed with people and constant noise. But the enlightened teachers taught a profound concept called the sacred void. They taught that emptiness is never a negative or a deeply tragic thing. A clay bowl is only useful because of the empty space inside it. A wooden house is only livable because of the empty rooms within its solid walls. The empty space in your life right now is exactly like that blank canvas. It is exactly like the empty space inside the useful clay bowl. When someone suddenly walks away, they take their complicated colors with them. They take their loud noise, and their heavy demands. They leave behind a beautiful, completely clean, and quiet space. You must stop looking at this emptiness as a terrifying punishment. You must begin to see it clearly as the ultimate and supreme gift of possibility. We must learn the profound difference between painful loneliness and beautiful solitude. Loneliness is the desperate craving for someone else to complete your fragile existence. It is a state of deep emotional lack and a feeling of terrible deficiency. But true solitude is a state of magnificent and absolute spiritual fullness. It is sitting completely alone in a quiet room and feeling entirely surrounded by the vast love of the universe. When you achieve this beautiful state of solitude, the empty room becomes your safest and most sacred sanctuary. In this vast and quiet void, you finally have the absolute room to breathe. You no longer have to carefully arrange your day around the unpredictable moods of another person. The silence in your room is no longer a deafening roar of painful loneliness. It becomes a deeply soothing and profoundly healing symphony of inner peace. You can sit quietly with your own thoughts, without any external interruptions. You can finally hear the gentle, wise voice of your own pure intuition. This massive empty space is the incredibly fertile soil for your new beginning. You get to carefully decide what new things will enter your sacred space. You can choose to paint completely new and much brighter colors on your life canvas. You can fill the quiet room with your own passions, your own joy, and your own pure light. Embracing the void is a beautiful and brave act of profound self-love. You declare to the vast universe that you are perfectly whole and complete, exactly as you are. You completely realize that you do not need another human being to simply fill up the quiet space. You begin to completely cherish the quiet mornings and the peaceful, silent nights. You wake up and you drink your warm tea, enjoying the absolute stillness of the house. You walk outside in the fresh air, and you feel entirely connected to the natural world around you. The terrifying void slowly transforms into an incredibly comfortable and warm blanket. You realize that losing someone gave you the supreme opportunity to finally find yourself. The person who walked away accidentally gave you the greatest gift of your entire life. They gave you the empty space to truly discover your own soul. As you sit peacefully in this newly discovered and beautiful empty space, you will feel incredibly light. You will deeply enjoy the profound freedom of your own quiet company. The heavy burden of constantly pleasing someone else is completely lifted from your tired shoulders. But human memory is a very powerful and very sticky force. The ego does not want to surrender its past easily. You might look back at the long years you spent with that person and feel a sudden pang of sharp regret. You might feel a deep, burning sense of injustice regarding your precious time. You might quietly think to yourself that they belonged entirely to you. You feel that a precious part of your property was unfairly stolen by the changing winds of fate. We must gently examine this deeply painful thought and completely dismantle the grand illusion of human ownership. We look at the beautiful past, and we often feel a sharp pain. We think a precious part of our life was unfairly stolen from us. We use a very dangerous word in our daily human lives. We constantly use the word mine. We say my friend, my partner, and my beloved. We attach this tiny word to other living human beings. We firmly believe that because we love someone, they belong entirely to us. We think love is a solid contract of absolute and eternal ownership. But this is the grand illusion that causes our deepest suffering. We can never truly own another living soul. To deeply understand this delicate truth, we must travel to an ancient crossroads. In the middle of a vast and beautiful forest, there was a warm and busy inn. The innkeeper was a very generous and deeply kind man. He provided warm food and soft beds for every tired traveler who passed through. He loved his bustling inn, and he loved the lively company of his guests. But the innkeeper had a very deep and painful flaw in his heart. He became incredibly attached to every single person who walked through his wooden doors. When a joyful group of merchants stayed for a week, he felt completely happy. He laughed with them by the warm fire, and he shared his very best wine. He started to secretly believe that they were his permanent family. He thought they belonged safely to his warm and comfortable house. But when the bright morning arrived, the merchants packed their heavy bags. They paid for their stay, and they prepared to leave for the distant city. The innkeeper would fall into a terrible and completely dark sadness. He would weep bitterly at the front door, desperately begging the merchants to stay forever. He felt profoundly betrayed every single time a guest departed. He honestly believed they were stealing a precious piece of his own heart. He would sit in the empty dining room, feeling completely abandoned and entirely empty. One cold and rainy evening, a wise wandering monk arrived at the quiet inn. The monk had no possessions, except a simple wooden bowl and peaceful eyes. The innkeeper welcomed him warmly, and poured him a hot cup of fresh tea. The innkeeper sat beside the silent monk, and began to complain bitterly about his lonely life. He said the world was incredibly cruel, and people were entirely ungrateful. He explained how he gave his guests the best food, and the warmest beds. He said he loved them deeply, but they always broke his fragile heart by leaving. He asked the wise monk why human beings were so disloyal and cold. The monk took a slow sip of the warm tea, and smiled a very gentle smile. The monk pointed to the sturdy wooden chairs, and the crackling fire. He asked the innkeeper to look closely at his own beautiful house. The monk stated clearly that this building was a roadside inn, not a locked prison. He said travelers come from the dusty road to find a brief moment of rest. They share their joyful stories, and they share their warm laughter. They bring temporary life and bright energy into the quiet rooms. But their ultimate destiny is always the open road, not the comfortable inn. The monk explained a profound and deeply liberating truth. He told the innkeeper that he did not own the travelers, and he did not own their journeys. His beautiful purpose was simply to be a warm host, for a very short period of time. The monk told him to completely stop treating his guests like permanent property. He said if you expect a traveler to stay forever, you will turn your warm inn into a heavy trap. You will completely destroy the pure beauty of their visit by demanding an impossible forever. We must all apply this profound wisdom to our own fragile human hearts. Your life is exactly like that warm and beautiful roadside inn. The people you deeply love are simply travelers on their own mysterious journey. They walk through your open doors, bringing their unique light and their joyful laughter. They sit by the warm fire of your affection, and they rest in your gentle care. You share magnificent and entirely real moments together. The love you experience is absolutely genuine, and the joy is completely true. But no matter how much you love them, you can never own their path. You do not hold the title deed to their free human soul. They have their own distant mountains to climb, and their own deep rivers to cross. Sometimes their unique journey requires them to walk alongside you for many long years. But sometimes their path suddenly turns, taking them entirely away from your familiar house. When they pack their bags and say goodbye, it is not a cruel betrayal of your warm hospitality. It is simply the natural continuation of their own personal destiny. If you constantly try to lock the doors, to keep people inside, you create a suffocating prison. You destroy the beautiful and completely free nature of true love. Love is never about possessing another person, like a shiny gold coin in your pocket. True love is the brave and generous act of spiritual hospitality. It is holding the door wide open, welcoming them with a pure and happy heart. And it is holding the exact same door open when it is time for them to finally leave. You must look back at the people who have left you with a completely new vision. You must stop seeing them as cruel thieves who stole your precious time. You must clearly see them as beautiful guests who honored your inn with their temporary presence. You simply say a quiet and deep thank you for the warm moments you shared by the fire. You bless their ongoing journey, and you gently sweep the floor of your quiet rooms. You prepare your vast and open heart for the completely new travelers who will inevitably arrive tomorrow. When you completely drop the heavy myth of ownership, a massive burden falls from your tired shoulders. You stop living in constant, terrible fear of losing the people you love. You finally realize that you cannot lose something that you never actually owned in the first place. This beautiful realization does not make your relationships cold or deeply distant. It actually makes your connections incredibly deep and vastly more beautiful. Because you know the time is completely temporary, you value every single second with absolute clarity. You cherish the warm smile of your companion right now, without secretly worrying about tomorrow. You experience the pure joy of their presence, without laying heavy chains around their ankles. This is the supreme freedom of an awakened and loving heart. You are a graceful and generous host, living peacefully in the ever-changing flow of existence. But recognizing this deep impermanence brings a very challenging reality to the surface. If everyone is just a temporary guest, how do we find the incredible courage to love deeply again? How do we open our doors to completely new travelers, knowing they will also leave one day? Does accepting the truth of impermanence mean we should just lock our doors forever, to strictly avoid future pain? We must look deeply into the true nature of courage, and learn how to keep our hearts incredibly soft, in a world of constant goodbyes. We have realized a profound truth about the human journey. Everyone is simply a temporary guest, walking through the open doors of our life. But this deep and liberating realization can sometimes create a completely new and heavy fear. If every single person will eventually leave, why should we ever open our doors again? Why should we invest our precious time, and our deep emotions, into something that will inevitably end? The fragile human ego desperately wants to protect itself from any future pain. It whispers a very convincing, and very dark lie in our minds. It tells us to build a massive, solid stone wall around our tired heart. It tells us that feeling absolutely nothing at all is much safer than feeling the sharp pain of loss. We are deeply tempted to lock the doors of our warm inn forever. To find the true courage to love again, we must travel to a beautiful and windy coastline. There lived a very patient and deeply focused artist. He did not paint on heavy canvas, and he did not carve thick solid stone. He worked entirely with fine, brightly colored sand. Every single morning, he would walk down to the wet, empty beach. He would spend many long and exhausting hours, carefully arranging the colored sand with his bare hands. He created magnificent and breathtaking patterns, full of vibrant colors and deeply complex shapes. The beautiful art stretched across the wide beach, glowing brightly in the warm afternoon sun. The local villagers would always come down to the water, to deeply admire his incredible work. But they were always completely confused by his strange choice of location. He always built his beautiful sand art right at the very edge of the dark water. He knew with absolute certainty that the evening tide would eventually rise. He knew the salty ocean waves would completely wash away his magnificent hard work. A young villager finally asked the gentle artist a very practical and common question. He asked why the artist spent so much intense energy on something that would completely disappear by sunset. He said it was a terrible waste of precious time, and a deeply tragic loss of beauty. The gentle artist smiled a very peaceful, and deeply wise smile. He looked closely at his magnificent creation, and then he looked calmly at the rising ocean. He explained a profound and deeply beautiful secret to the confused villagers. He said the fragile and completely temporary nature of the sand was exactly what made it so incredibly beautiful. If the beautiful art was carved in heavy permanent stone, people would quickly get used to it. They would walk past it every single day, without truly looking at its profound beauty. But because they knew it would completely vanish by nightfall, they stopped their busy lives, and truly appreciated its brief and glorious existence. The artist said he did not create the beautiful art to lock it away and own it forever. He created it simply to experience the pure, magnificent joy of making it. He wanted to share a fleeting, completely perfect moment of beauty with the world. He knew the vast ocean would take it back, and he was entirely at peace with the natural tide. This beautiful artist holds the ultimate and supreme key to loving bravely in a fragile world. Your pure human heart is exactly like that vibrant, colored sand. The deep relationships you build with other people are magnificent and deeply beautiful creations. But they are completely subject to the rising tides of human life. When you deeply understand that a relationship is temporary, you do not love the person less. You actually love them so much more. You love with an incredible, burning intensity, because you know the time is incredibly rare and precious. You do not waste your numbered days arguing over tiny, meaningless things. You do not hold on to bitter grudges, and you do not easily ignore their warm smiles. You pay very close attention to their voice, exactly like the villagers watching the beautiful sand art before the sun goes down. Knowing that the end is always possible, completely wakes you up to the magnificent reality of the present moment. If you decide to lock your heart away, to completely avoid the pain of goodbye, you will certainly avoid the sharp pain. But you will also completely avoid the profound and supreme joy of living. A heart that is safely locked in a dark iron box does not get broken by the changing winds. But it also never truly beats. It slowly turns into a cold and heavy stone, completely numb to the bright sunshine and the warm, gentle rain. A life lived in absolute fear of loss is not a real life at all. It is simply a long and quiet waiting room, completely devoid of deep meaning and true color. True courage is not the total and complete absence of fear. True courage is feeling the deep, trembling fear of loss, and bravely choosing to open your warm heart anyway. It is looking at a completely new traveler on the dusty road, and inviting them into your quiet inn. You warmly offer them a seat by the bright fire, fully knowing they will eventually pack their heavy bags. You bravely offer your pure love, without demanding a strict, impossible guarantee of forever. You love them exactly like the wise artist loves his colored sand. You pour your absolute best effort into the beautiful connection today, completely surrendering the unknown tomorrow to the vast universe. When you decide to unlock the heavy iron door of your heart, you will naturally feel incredibly vulnerable. You will feel exactly like a tiny, fragile seed, pushing its way out of the dark soil into the bright open air. The wind will feel very cold at first, and the unknown future will look very vast. But you must deeply trust the immense, unbroken strength of your own resilient spirit. You have already survived the very worst emotional storms. You have already walked bravely through the darkest and coldest valleys of betrayal. You know with absolute certainty, that even if the new sand art is completely washed away, you still have the creative power inside your own hands. You can always rebuild the beautiful patterns of your life. The dark ocean tide can wash away the colored sand, but it can never wash away your profound ability to love. Your deep capacity to love is an infinite and flowing wellspring inside your own chest. It does not dry up, simply because one confused person refused to drink from it. It does not completely disappear, simply because someone carelessly walked away. The more you bravely give your pure love to the world, the more the infinite wellspring completely fills itself back up. You become a magnificent, deeply fearless force of nature, completely unaffected by the changing tides. This courageous love completely transforms your entire human experience. It strips away the heavy, suffocating layers of toxic attachment and deep fear. It leaves only the pure, golden core of genuine and unselfish affection. You become incredibly grateful for every single shared smile, and every single quiet conversation. You finally understand that a successful and beautiful relationship is not defined by how many long years it lasts. A relationship is deeply successful if it brings brilliant light and true growth to your soul, even for a very short season. The beautiful and fragrant flowers of spring only last for a few short weeks. But we never call the bright spring a terrible failure. We do not mourn the wilting flowers as a grand tragedy of nature. We completely celebrate their brief and glorious blooming with absolute joy and deep gratitude. You must deeply learn to celebrate the beautiful seasons of your life, exactly like the brief and glorious spring. You must completely embrace the passing beauty, without demanding it to stay frozen in the freezing winter. As you bravely decide to open your heart again, a quiet miracle begins to unfold inside your mind. You will begin to look back at the people who carelessly left you in the past. You will look at them with completely new, and deeply wise eyes. You will start to realize that their painful departure was not just a random and cruel tragedy. You will gently discover that every single person who breaks your heart leaves behind a very specific and priceless gift. We must gently sift through the cold ashes of the past, to find the hidden wisdom they unknowingly left behind. We must learn how to completely recognize, and deeply understand, the profound message of the silent teacher. What if the person who broke your heart the most, was actually your greatest teacher in disguise? We usually look at the people who betray us, with eyes completely full of bitter anger. We see them as cruel thieves, who violently stole our precious time and our innocent trust. We want to completely erase their existence, from the heavy records of our memory. We naturally believe that our lives would be completely perfect, if we had never met them at all. But the profound wisdom of the awakened ones, offers a completely different and revolutionary perspective. Every single person who enters your life, is a completely necessary teacher. And the ones who cause you the most terrible pain, are often the ones carrying the most vital lessons. Let us travel to a very ancient and distant kingdom. The kingdom was deeply famous for its incredible warriors, and its completely unmatched weapons. In the busy capital city, there lived a legendary sword maker. He could forge the most beautiful steel blades the world had ever seen. The metal was incredibly pure, and the swords shone brightly in the warm sunlight. But a beautiful sword is completely useless if the edge is not incredibly sharp. To sharpen his perfect blades, the master did not use soft and expensive silk. He did not use gentle, flowing water. He used a very harsh, incredibly rough, and completely ugly gray stone. One bright morning, a young apprentice watched the master working on a magnificent royal sword. The apprentice saw the master rubbing the bright steel violently against the rough stone. The process created a very loud and terrible screeching sound in the quiet room. The harsh friction created burning hot sparks, flying wildly into the dark air. The young apprentice was completely horrified, truly thinking the master was destroying the beautiful weapon. He immediately asked the master why he was using such a cruel and abrasive object against the pure and delicate steel. The wise master stopped his heavy work, and smiled a very patient smile. He held up the rough and ugly gray stone, for the young boy to see clearly. He explained that the beautiful sword can never discover its own true sharpness, by resting comfortably in a soft silk box. The blade requires the intense and painful friction of the hard stone, to completely reveal its ultimate purpose. The stone aggressively scratches the soft surface, and it violently grinds away the weak metal. It feels exactly like a terrible and destructive punishment to the steel. But when the painful process is finally over, the sword becomes incredibly brilliant and perfectly sharp. The rough stone is then simply put away, left completely behind in the dark workshop. This profound and powerful story is the exact reflection of your own painful human relationships. The people who love you gently are exactly like the soft silk box. They bring you deep comfort, and they make you feel incredibly safe. But comfort rarely forces a human soul to truly grow and completely awaken. The people who suddenly betray you, and the people who carelessly walk away, are exactly like that rough sharpening stone. Their cruel actions create a terrible and painful friction, deep inside your fragile heart. They aggressively scratch the delicate surface of your ego. They grind away your heavy illusions, and your completely foolish attachments. When you are going through the bitter heartbreak, it feels exactly like a completely senseless destruction. You feel the burning sparks of anger, and you hear the loud screeching of your own inner panic. You deeply wonder why the universe is allowing this terrible and rough stone to completely ruin your peaceful life. But you must look closely at what remains, after the harsh friction finally stops. The person who left you, forced you to completely confront your own hidden weaknesses. Perhaps they clearly showed you how incredibly dependent you were on external validation. When they suddenly took their approval away, you were forced to finally find your own inner worth. Perhaps their sudden departure revealed your deep and terrified fear of being completely alone. By forcing you to sit in the empty room, they gave you the ultimate push to conquer that dark fear. They completely ground away your weak layers of dependency. They forced your soul to become incredibly strong, and incredibly sharp. You are far wiser today, simply because they broke your innocent and foolish illusions. If they had stayed comfortably by your side forever, you might have remained completely asleep. You might have lived your entire life, totally unaware of your own magnificent inner strength. They were a completely necessary and vital chapter in the grand book of your spiritual awakening. They were your silent and brilliant teacher, completely disguised as a cruel betrayer. We completely misunderstand the true nature of human interactions. We naturally believe that a successful relationship must last until our dying breath. But the vast universe sends specific people into our lives for very specific and temporary missions. Some people arrive like a gentle spring rain to nourish our soul when we are completely dry. Other people arrive like a violent forest fire to completely burn down everything we thought we knew. The fire is incredibly terrifying and deeply destructive to the old garden. But it completely clears the dense forest floor, allowing new and magnificent trees to finally grow. The person who betrayed your deep trust was that completely necessary fire. They showed you the absolute danger of building your entire foundation on shifting sand. They taught you the profound difference between genuine love and toxic attachment. When someone treats you with careless cruelty, they are actually giving you a masterclass in human boundaries. They teach you exactly what you must never tolerate again. They show you the exact behavior that you must completely protect yourself from in the unknown future. You learn to clearly recognize the subtle warning signs long before the storm actually hits. This is incredibly valuable knowledge that you could never learn from a simple textbook. You only learn it through the raw, aching experience of a broken heart. You must deeply honor your own survival, and look at the magnificent resilience of your own spirit. You faced the complete collapse of your world, and yet you are still standing here today. You are still breathing the fresh air, and your heart is still beautifully beating. The silent teacher tried to completely break you, but they totally failed. Instead of breaking you, they accidentally built you into a completely unstoppable force. You have successfully graduated from one of the most difficult classes in the great school of human suffering. And because you have learned this profound lesson, you will never make the exact same mistake again. You will enter your next beautiful relationships with your eyes completely wide open. You will love with a pure and generous heart, but you will never surrender your own absolute power. You will trust people gently, but your deepest trust will always remain firmly with yourself. This is the ultimate, magnificent gift of the silent teacher. When you truly grasp this liberating concept, your entire perspective shifts dramatically. You completely stop playing the weak and helpless victim of a cruel and unfair world. You become an empowered and deeply grateful student of the great university of life. You look back at the bitter memories, and you extract the pure, golden wisdom hidden inside the pain. You clearly separate the painful event from the profound lesson it brought into your soul. You realize that the silent teacher did their difficult job perfectly, and then they naturally departed. Just like the rough stone is put away, their role in your life is completely finished. You do not need to carry the ugly gray stone around in your pocket, simply because it sharpened your blade. You do not need to keep the painful person in your life, and you do not need to constantly hate them. You simply acknowledge the sharp wisdom they gave you, and you peacefully let them go. You can quietly whisper a deeply sincere thank you to the universe that sent them to you. You thank the harsh friction for completely waking you up from your comfortable sleep. You thank the deep pain for expanding your heart and deepening your pure empathy. Every single tear you cried in the dark night watered the beautiful seeds of your new wisdom. Your soul is now a magnificent and razor-sharp blade, completely ready to cut through the grand illusions of the world. You are incredibly strong, deeply peaceful, and totally self-reliant. The heavy baggage of the past is finally falling away from your tired shoulders. But the human mind is a very clever and highly restless traveler. Even when we completely learn the profound lesson, the mind still loves to wander backward. It loves to constantly replay the old memories, exactly like an old and broken song. It loves to pull us back into the shadows of yesterday. To truly step into your bright new life, you must learn how to stop time traveling in your own head. You must discover the profound and ultimate secret of anchoring your entire being in the perfect reality of today. We have deeply learned the profound lesson of the silent teacher. We have completely taken back our power from the bitter past. But the human mind is a very restless and incredibly stubborn traveler. It loves to constantly wander backward into the dark and painful shadows of yesterday. You are sitting safely in your quiet room, but your mind is completely trapped in a time that is already gone. You constantly replay the exact moment they left you. You listen to their cruel words, over and over again in your tired head. It is exactly like listening to an old, broken song. We desperately try to change the past in our minds, but the past is completely written in permanent ink. This exhausting mental time travel is the absolute greatest thief of your present peace. To deeply understand this destructive mental habit, let us visit a vast and ancient library. In a grand city of the East, there lived a very dedicated young scribe. His daily job was to carefully copy the ancient historical records. He read thousands of old scrolls, detailing the tragic fall of old empires, and the bitter betrayals of ancient kings. The young scribe became completely obsessed with the painful tragedies of the past. He spent his entire day crying over people who had died many centuries ago. He was so deeply distracted by the sadness of yesterday that he completely ignored his own beautiful life today. Every single morning, the temple cooks brought him a beautiful bowl of fresh, warm rice. They brought him sweet, ripe fruit, perfectly grown in the bright temple garden. But the young scribe was far too busy reading his sad scrolls to ever eat his warm meals. He would leave the fresh food sitting entirely neglected on his wooden table. By the time he finally looked up from his old books, the bright sun had completely set. The warm rice had turned cold and hard, and the sweet fruit had completely rotted. He went to sleep hungry and deeply exhausted, every single night. One quiet morning, the oldest master of the temple walked into the dusty library. He saw the young scribe weeping over an old scroll, and he saw the completely ruined food on the table. The wise master gently took the old scroll, completely out of the young man's hands. He pointed to the ruined bowl of rice, and he spoke with a very clear, waking voice. He told the young scribe that he was starving his own living body, simply to feed the dead ghosts of yesterday. The master explained a profound and timeless truth about the absolute nature of human time. He said the past is exactly like dry ink on an old and brittle paper. No matter how many bitter tears you carefully cry over it, the dry ink will never change its shape. The future is exactly like a thick, mysterious fog, completely covering a distant mountain. You can stare into the heavy fog all day, but you can never clearly see what is hiding inside. The only thing that is truly real, and completely alive, is this exact present moment. The master told him to put the dusty scroll away, and finally eat his fresh, warm rice. He told him to deeply taste the sweet fruit, while the bright sun was still warmly shining. You are exactly like that young, exhausted scribe. The person who completely broke your heart belongs entirely to the old scrolls of your past. The painful betrayal already happened, and the dark ink is completely dry. But your incredibly stubborn mind completely refuses to put the dusty scroll away. You keep reading the tragic ending, expecting the sad story to somehow magically change. By keeping your entire focus on the painful past, you are letting the beautiful present moment completely rot away. You are completely missing the fresh, warm rice of your current life. The sun is rising beautifully outside your window right now. The gentle birds are singing their sweet morning songs. Your physical body is breathing the clean, fresh air. But you cannot see or feel any of this magnificent beauty, because you are completely trapped in a time that no longer exists. You are suffering terribly over a heavy illusion, completely created by your own restless memory. The enlightened ones taught a magnificent, and deeply practical way, to completely escape this dark mental prison. They taught the absolute and supreme power of the present moment. You do not need to aggressively fight your busy mind. You do not need to fiercely force yourself to forget the past. You simply need to bring your gentle attention completely back to the physical world right now. When you deeply feel the dark memories pulling you backward, you must immediately anchor yourself in your own physical breathing. You take a very slow and incredibly deep breath. You deeply feel the cool air entering your nose, and you feel your tired chest slowly rising. You quietly tell yourself that in this exact second, you are completely safe. The person who deeply hurt you is not standing in your quiet room. The terrible storm has already passed, and the heavy, violent wind has completely stopped. Right here, and right now, there is absolutely no active betrayal happening to you. There is only the quiet room, the steady beating of your brave heart, and the gentle, continuous flow of your breath. When you successfully anchor your restless mind in the present moment, a profound and immediate miracle happens inside your soul. The heavy, crushing weight of the past completely drops from your tired shoulders. The terrible anxiety about the unknown future instantly evaporates into thin air. You discover a vast and completely untouched peace, resting deeply inside the current second. You clearly realize that true happiness is never found by fixing the broken pieces of yesterday. True happiness is found by completely engaging with the incredibly beautiful reality of today. You learn to deeply taste your warm tea, completely focusing on its rich and comforting flavor. You learn to truly listen to the wind in the green trees, letting the natural sound completely wash over your calm mind. You stop living inside your chaotic head, and you finally start living in your actual, vibrant life. You completely reclaim your absolute power from the heavy ghost of yesterday. You boldly decide that the person who left you is no longer allowed to steal your present joy. They completely took a piece of your past, but they absolutely cannot touch your present, unless you foolishly give them the keys. You lock the heavy wooden door to the past, and you throw the iron key into the deep ocean. You step entirely out into the bright sunlight, completely ready to experience the pure, magnificent magic of now. But as you learn to live beautifully in the peaceful present moment, you will suddenly notice something very real resting inside you. The deep peace of the present is incredibly soothing, but the raw, aching wound of betrayal is still quietly sitting in your chest. The dark, heavy mud of the painful experience is still resting at the bottom of your clear mental pond. We cannot simply ignore this dark mud, and we cannot aggressively throw it away. We must learn the supreme and magnificent art of deep spiritual alchemy. We must learn exactly how to transform the dark, ugly mud into the most beautiful and radiant flower. You have learned to anchor your mind in the present moment. You have found a quiet sanctuary inside your breathing. But as you sit in this beautiful silence, you might feel a heavy weight still resting in your chest. The sharp pain has completely stopped, but the dark mud of the betrayal remains. We often look at this dark mud, and we feel deeply ashamed. We think the painful memory is a terrible stain on our soul. We want to completely scrub it away, hoping to become entirely clean again. But the enlightened ones taught a completely different way to heal. They taught the magnificent art of spiritual alchemy. To understand this profound transformation, we must travel to a beautiful and ancient water garden. The garden belonged to a very wise and patient caretaker. The garden was completely filled with bright flowers, and clear singing streams. But in the very back corner of the estate, there was a dark and foul-smelling swamp. The water was completely thick with heavy, black mud. It looked incredibly ugly, and it smelled of deep decay. Many visitors told the caretaker to completely drain the swamp. They told him to fill the ugly hole with clean, white stones. They wanted to completely erase the dark mud from the beautiful garden. But the wise caretaker simply smiled, and shook his head gently. He knew a profound secret about the dark and heavy mud. He walked carefully to the edge of the foul swamp, carrying a tiny and completely ordinary seed. He gently pushed the small seed deep into the thick black mud. He did not drain the swamp, and he did not cover it with stones. He simply let the natural magic of the universe take over. For many long weeks, absolutely nothing happened on the surface. The mud remained entirely dark, and completely silent. But deep under the thick water, a magnificent struggle was taking place. The tiny seed began to completely absorb the heavy nutrients, hidden inside the foul mud. It used the dark and toxic decay, as the absolute perfect fuel for its own growth. It pushed a tiny green shoot up through the heavy darkness, desperately reaching for the warm sunlight. One bright and quiet morning, a beautiful green pad finally broke the surface of the swamp. And a few days later, a breathtaking miracle completely unfolded. A magnificent pink lotus flower bloomed brilliantly, right in the middle of the dark mud. The delicate petals were completely spotless, radiating a pure and flawless beauty. The flower did not have a single stain of the foul mud on its bright skin. But the caretaker knew the absolute truth. The breathtaking beauty of the lotus was entirely born from the dark mud. Without the heavy and ugly decay at the bottom, the magnificent flower could never exist at all. The mud and the lotus were deeply and intimately connected. This beautiful story holds the ultimate secret to completely healing your wounded heart. The terrible betrayal you suffered is exactly like that dark and heavy mud. It feels incredibly toxic, and it sits heavily in the deep bottom of your soul. You deeply wish you could completely drain the swamp of your past. You wish you could erase the bitter memories, and replace them with clean white stones. But you must completely stop fighting the dark mud inside you. You must embrace the magnificent art of spiritual alchemy. You must completely transform the raw, aching pain, into the absolute perfect fuel for your spiritual awakening. Every single time you feel the sharp sting of betrayal, you must plant a tiny seed of pure compassion. You use the heavy sadness to deeply soften your ego. You use the bitter disappointment to completely shatter your foolish illusions. The painful experience teaches you how incredibly fragile the human heart truly is. And this deep understanding makes you vastly more gentle with every single person you meet. You begin to grow a magnificent lotus of wisdom, right out of your darkest tragedy. You rise completely above the bitter resentment, reaching directly for the warm sunlight of forgiveness. When you finally bloom, your soul becomes incredibly radiant and perfectly pure. You do not carry the dark stains of anger on your beautiful petals. You are completely clean, and deeply at peace. But you also hold a profound and quiet gratitude for the dark mud that forced you to grow. You realize that without the terrible heartbreak, you would never have found your own absolute strength. You would never have discovered the vast and infinite capacity of your own awakened heart. The person who carelessly threw you into the dark swamp actually gave you the exact environment you needed to finally bloom. They thought they were completely destroying you. But they were actually planting you exactly where you needed to be. You have turned their bitter poison into your own supreme medicine. This is the absolute highest peak of human resilience. It is the glorious and total victory of the light over the dark shadows of the world. You are no longer a helpless victim of a cruel fate. You are a magnificent and powerful creator, completely capable of turning deep sorrow into breathtaking beauty. You stand tall and peaceful, fully rooted in the complex reality of human life. As you bloom gracefully above the dark water, you begin to deeply feel the gentle breeze of the universe. You start to completely notice the rising and falling of the sun. You clearly see that the entire cosmos is a massive, elegant dance of constant change. You are entirely ready to completely align your own heartbeat with the profound and unchangeable rhythm of all existence. You have bloomed exactly like the beautiful lotus. You have completely transformed the dark mud into pure light. Now you stand tall above the water. You look out at the vast and endless universe. You begin to notice a very profound and ancient rhythm. Everything around you is in constant motion. The soft clouds never stay in the exact same shape. The bright stars slowly rotate in the vast night sky. The seasons shift gracefully from cold winter to warm spring. Nothing in the natural world ever stands perfectly still. This constant motion is the absolute and unchangeable truth of existence. We suffer incredibly heavy pain because we try to fight this natural rhythm. We want the beautiful spring to last forever. We want our physical youth to never fade away. We desperately want the people we love to never change their minds. We stand right in the middle of a rushing river, and we try to build a solid stone wall. The river of life constantly crashes against our rigid wall. This heavy crash creates the terrible friction we call human suffering. The deep pain does not come from the flowing river. The pain comes entirely from our own stubborn resistance. Let us travel to a beautiful and ancient music hall. There lived a master musician who played a wooden stringed instrument. He had many eager students who wanted to learn his beautiful art. One young student was incredibly strong and very determined. He wanted to force the thin strings to make the loudest and most powerful sound. He pulled the strings with intense and aggressive force. He played his music with a rigid and angry heartbeat. But the music he created was incredibly harsh and completely chaotic. The beautiful wooden instrument sounded exactly like a screaming bird. The heavy strings eventually snapped under his violent pressure. The wise master gently took the broken instrument from the young student. He slowly replaced the broken strings with completely new ones. He did not use heavy force, and he did not hold his breath in anger. He completely relaxed his entire physical body. He listened closely to the natural vibration of the hollow wood. He perfectly aligned his own steady breathing with the gentle rhythm of the strings. He moved his fingers completely effortlessly, exactly like water flowing over smooth stones. The music he created was breathtakingly beautiful and deeply peaceful. It filled the entire grand hall with pure and absolute harmony. The wise master looked at the deeply frustrated young student. He explained a profound and timeless secret about creating true harmony. He said you can never force the instrument to completely obey your angry will. You must completely surrender your own rigid rhythm, and smoothly join the natural flow of the music. You must let the music play you, instead of trying to violently control the music. This beautiful lesson applies directly to your own fragile human life. The vast universe is playing a magnificent and completely unstoppable symphony. The grand symphony is called impermanence. Impermanence simply means that every single note must eventually fade away. A beautiful musical note cannot last forever, or the grand song would completely stop. The natural ending of one note is the exact requirement for the birth of the next note. When a person walks into your life, they are a beautiful note in your personal symphony. You must listen to their unique melody with a completely open and grateful heart. But when their specific note naturally fades away, you must not aggressively strike the broken string. You must not scream at the silent wooden instrument. You must simply breathe deeply, and prepare your ears for the completely new notes that will inevitably arrive. When you completely align your personal rhythm with this grand symphony, a massive miracle happens inside your chest. You completely stop fighting the natural passing of time. You watch the brown autumn leaves fall to the ground with a gentle, knowing smile. You watch the people you deeply love change and grow, without feeling a terrible sense of panic. You finally accept that your own physical body will slowly age and fade. You are no longer terrified of the dark and unknown future. You simply trust the great composer of the universe. You know the beautiful music will always continue, even if the melody changes completely. This profound alignment brings the ultimate and supreme freedom to your tired soul. You walk through the busy world with incredibly light footsteps. You do not carry the heavy burden of trying to control the wild wind. You do not drag the heavy anchor of demanding absolute permanence. You are completely free to simply dance with the beautiful and changing tides. You deeply enjoy the bright sunshine when the sky is totally clear. You peacefully listen to the heavy rain when the dark storms arrive. You find deep and unshakable peace in every single passing moment, precisely because you absolutely know the moment will quickly pass. You stop building rigid stone walls in the middle of the rushing river. You gently build a small wooden boat instead. You sit peacefully in your simple boat, and you let the river of life carry you forward. You completely trust the deep water to take you exactly where you need to go. You do not constantly row against the strong current. You simply rest your tired arms, and you deeply admire the beautiful passing scenery. The heavy friction in your mind completely disappears, leaving only a vast and silent ocean of pure calm. You have traveled a very long and incredibly difficult path. You have bravely survived the terrible shock of sudden betrayal. You have learned to gracefully drop the heavy stone of bitter resentment. You have completely transformed the dark mud of your pain into a brilliant lotus of pure wisdom. You have completely aligned your beating heart with the grand, changing rhythm of the vast cosmos. But there is one final and incredibly vital step on this beautiful healing journey. You must discover the absolute safest place in the entire world. You must find the one and only true refuge that will never betray you. We spend our entire lives looking for a permanent home in the fragile hearts of other people. But human hearts are constantly shifting, exactly like the desert sand. To find absolute and unbreakable security, we must completely turn our vision inward. It is time to gracefully walk away from the noisy outside world. It is time to finally return to your true and eternal home. We spend our entire lives searching for a completely safe place. We build heavy houses out of thick stone and strong wood. We lock the heavy doors, hoping to keep the cold wind out. But the most common mistake we make is building our emotional home inside another human being. We take our fragile heart, and we place it carefully into their hands. We tell them to protect it, and we ask them to keep it warm. We truly believe that their love is our ultimate and permanent shelter. But human beings are deeply fragile, and their feelings constantly shift. Building your home inside someone else is exactly like building a grand house on soft sand. When the heavy rain comes, the soft sand quickly washes away. The beautiful house completely collapses, leaving you alone in the cold storm. To find the absolute true refuge, we must travel to a high and quiet mountain peak. There lived a completely silent sage, who had traveled the entire world. He had seen grand empires fall, and he had seen massive mountains crumble. One day, a very tired wanderer climbed the steep mountain path. The wanderer was completely exhausted, and his clothes were badly torn. He sat down heavily in front of the silent sage, and began to weep bitterly. He said he had traveled to many different villages, looking for a permanent home. He said he trusted many different people, hoping they would give him a safe place to rest. But every single time, the people eventually changed their minds. They asked him to leave, and they locked their doors behind him. He asked the wise sage where he could finally find a home that would never disappear. The silent sage looked at the tired wanderer, with eyes full of deep and vast compassion. The sage did not point to a distant city, and he did not point to a hidden cave. He slowly raised his hand, and gently pointed directly at the chest of the wanderer. He told the tired man that the ultimate home is never found in the outside world. He said every single house built of wood will eventually rot and fall. Every single promise made by a human being is subject to the changing winds of time. The only absolute safe place is deeply hidden inside your own awakened spirit. You are the ultimate sanctuary you have been desperately searching for your entire life. The enlightened ones taught a very profound and simple message. They told us to be an island unto ourselves. An island stands perfectly firm, in the middle of the massive and unpredictable ocean. The heavy waves completely crash against the shore, and the fierce winds blow across the sand. But the solid island never runs away, and it never sinks into the dark water. You must become exactly like that firm and beautiful island. You must stop completely depending on other people to bring you deep peace. You must stop demanding the outside world to constantly make you feel safe and loved. When you deeply realize this profound truth, a massive and heavy chain falls from your tired soul. You completely stop begging people to stay. You stop compromising your own precious values, just to keep someone comfortable. You walk into the busy world with a completely open heart, but you carry your own home securely inside you. If someone chooses to walk beside you, you gladly share your warmth and your beautiful light. You enjoy their lovely company, and you deeply appreciate their presence. But if they suddenly turn around and walk away, you do not collapse into pieces. You simply wave goodbye, and you retreat safely into your own unbreakable inner sanctuary. Your inner home is built with the incredibly strong bricks of self-love. It is deeply warmed by the bright fire of your own pure awareness. The roof is entirely made of profound forgiveness, completely protecting you from the bitter rain of resentment. No one can ever evict you from this magnificent spiritual house. No one can ever steal the keys, because there are absolutely no locks on the doors. You are completely free, and you are completely secure. You have successfully transformed your deep sorrow into an absolute and unshakable fortress of peace. As you sit quietly in your beautiful inner home, you look back at the difficult journey you have taken. You see the gentle tea maker who lost his beloved student. You see the wealthy merchant who lost his quiet shadow. You see the deep and flowing river of your own restless mind. You see the magnificent lotus, blooming brilliantly in the dark mud. Every single story, and every single painful tear, has carefully led you to this exact beautiful moment. You are completely whole, exactly as you are right now. You do not need another person to magically fix your broken pieces. You have carefully put the pieces back together, with the pure gold of your own deep wisdom. The cracks in your heart are no longer signs of terrible weakness. They are beautiful and shining proof of your incredible resilience and your vast strength. You have walked bravely through the darkest valleys, and you have climbed the steepest mountains of human grief. And now, you are finally resting in the warm and gentle sunlight. The people who hurt you have completely faded into the distant background. Their careless words no longer echo in your quiet mind. Their sudden departure is no longer a heavy tragedy. It is simply a necessary turn in the grand and beautiful river of your life. You look at the vast and open sky, and you breathe in the fresh and clean air. You feel a profound and deep gratitude for every single experience the universe has given you. You deeply thank the gentle joy for making your heart sing. You completely thank the heavy sorrow for making your soul incredibly deep. You breathe softly, and you feel the immense power of your own steady heartbeat. You realize that you are entirely capable of generating your own profound happiness. You look at the beautiful path ahead of you with eyes full of bright hope. The path is completely clear, and the bright sun is shining warmly. You are not carrying any heavy baggage from yesterday. You are walking lightly, and you are smiling gently at the wonderful world. You are now completely ready to live your life with absolute and pure courage. You will continue to love people deeply, knowing that love is the absolute highest purpose of the human journey. But you will love without heavy attachment, and you will give without any bitter expectations. You will dance beautifully with the changing seasons, completely trusting the natural rhythm of the vast cosmos. You know that everything changes, and you are entirely at peace with this profound truth. When the dark night eventually falls, you simply light a warm candle inside your own chest. You sit peacefully with your own quiet breath, feeling the gentle presence of the entire universe around you. You are never truly alone, because you are deeply connected to everything that exists. You are a beautiful and completely essential part of the grand and flowing river of life. You have finally found your way through the terrible storm. You have successfully crossed the dark and turbulent ocean. You have finally arrived at the safest and most beautiful place in the entire world. Welcome to your true and eternal home.